Look at us now, tip to tip.
Jesus.
Shout out to Morning Kombat.
Do you want a margarita?
Yes!
My God!
To us, doing what we love. It's time to bang.
Heavy metal rap with a 4-4 banger. I don't even know how to finish it. What's up, everybody? How you doing on this Monday? August 18th, 2024. My name is Luke Thomas. That's Chuck Mindenhall. This is Morning Kombat. Yes, indeed it is. How you doing, Chuck?
I'm well. You know, this is the first time I've been with you in the studio and probably since the second time you were ever in it.
I'm a more loving partner.
Yes,
so
you are.
It'll be great. How are you? Everything is well in Iceman land?
Yeah, everything's great, man. Everything's rolling. And
Would I said 18th? It's the 19th? You know what, motherfucker? It's the 18th if I want it to be. How about that? What's up, Chuck? How you doing, bro?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Yeah. Where did you watch the fights on Saturday?
I watched them from home.
In La Casa?
Yeah. Fortunately, I'm glad I wasn't in Perth, man. 11,000 miles from here.
John Anik, every time he travels there, is like, 5 men have died on this trip. They got dysentery in Doha along the way.
Oh, my God.
I had to abandon them 3 weeks ago.
Well, at least he's always in those, like, reclining cabins where, the first class,
But, dude, there was one update he had on the way there.
Yeah.
It had been since he had left his door in Florida, 29 hours.
Oh, my God.
He had a layover in Sydney, I believe, and then another 4 or 5.
From Florida.
Yeah, and another 4-hour flight or 5-hour flight to Perth from there. I was like, dude, just quit your job. Just quit the fucking job.
I don't have it in me, man. I couldn't do that anymore.
Well, we have a lot to get to today. So first of all, glad you're here. Brian Campbell, I did text Brian this morning. I talked to him very briefly on text messages. He was telling me, he's like, dude, they don't like Prince Harry jokes at Buckingham Palace. And I'm like, yeah, I bet they don't, BC, you fucking idiot. So he's there enjoying his time there in England. I think he's in England or France. I'm not sure where he is. One of those two.
He's in somewhere in Europe.
Probably being a loud American asshole, which guilty as charged. I've done that too.
Yeah.
But we'll have him back next week. And so today on the show, let's see what we got here. UFC 305. We're going to get to all of that and then some. It's going to be a UFC 305 extravaganza. Plus, we're going to talk a little bit of CJI, probably skip some ADCC. I didn't put it on the rundown, Chuck, but we do, before we get out of here, we have to talk about UFC 307 and the announcement as well, where they're just giving number 8 ranked guys title shots. I mean, I don't mind it, but it's different.
All right, let's do it. Sounds good to
anything
me.
you want to plug before we get started?
Not really, Luke. I'm not much of a self-plugger, but I'm still doing the same show. We're still at the Ringer MMA show. We do it after every big pay-per-view and usually every Thursday before any UFC card.
All right.
That's it.
That's it.
And my byline is over there too, the Ringer.
Are you writing for them too?
Yeah.
Hey,
that shows how much you actually look at the websites these
do you
days.
know how much time I have to read? I'll read stuff that I see come across my timeline.
Yeah.
So if you're like, you had one non-MMA story recently. What was it?
I've done some, I've NBA stuff.
That must have been
a little bit of NFL stuff, but mostly MMA.
All right.
Yeah.
So if I see stuff like that, I'll definitely click on it. Definitely some like Denver Nuggets.
Anything outside of this
Denver
circus.
Nuggets homerism. I know exactly who to go to. Before we get started on the show, I want to remind folks we do have merch. There might be a code you can get 10% off. I don't even fucking know. morningcombat.store. Hey, Long Island Luke, first of all, nice to see you. By the way, tell the audience about your gigantic parlay that you hit.
Oh, baby, we hit on Dricus du Plessis by sub over 3.5 rounds.
I mean,
plus
that's wild,
2,800.
Plus 2,800 this guy hit. Plus 2,800.
And
Amazing.
you said you put $2,000 on that, right?
$3,000, Chuck.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
He's going to quit the job today on the air. I don't know. Did BC bring this up while I was gone? I don't even know if he did. Long Island Luke, did BC bring up the fact that the World MMA Awards, for reasons that blow my fucking mind, somehow nominated Morning Kombat again for best MMA programming? It's like, dude, we're nominating post World War II Germany after getting bombed to smithereens for best vacation destination. Did he bring that up?
I don't think he brought it up. We definitely need a lower for it, though. We both posted it on social. So.
Okay. All right. Let's tell the folks, I'm not even sure where you can go, but at least let's make them aware. Morning Kombat, again, I don't quite understand it, but listen, I'll take it. Well, I want them to vote. I want the resurrection starts now. But They did nominate us. They did nominate us for a fourth time for best MMA program. I think we're up against Ariel Show. What else are we up against?
Embedded. Contender series,
so weird.
the usuals.
All right.
I mean, these are different types of shows, very different.
Well, what it tells you is that there's just not much MMA.
I know. I was going to say, you could look at that two ways. Either you guys are that good or that the competition is really that
We've
bad.
got something special here, but, we've listened. It's like Gotti Ward. We've been down a couple times on the mat,
Well, you know what? I just went through and said you could watch me or hear me on the Ringer MMA show, and you know who's not nominated is that. So there you go. There's your competition.
Listen,
no
guys,
problem.
you know what you need? More fart jokes. That's what you need. More Buckingham Palace. Where's Prince Harry?
Yes, I
bits.
come here for those.
All right. Well, we got that out of the way. With that in mind, Chuck, why don't we get this process started? UFC 305 is in the books. What a show it was. I actually really enjoyed it for the most part, although there was some craziness, which we'll address. But let's start with that main event. Dricus du Plessis defeats Israel. By the way, I've been covering this guy for 7-8
You
years.
still don't know how to say his name.
And I know less how to pronounce his last name than ever. Adesanya, whatever. He wins via submission in the fourth round. Chuck, there's so many different elements to get to about this. But the first question I have for you is quite basic. What does a victory like this prove about Dricus du Plessis?
It's funny because I think that a guy like him, it's almost reminiscent a little bit of when Whittaker came up. Because when Whittaker came up and he was actually getting into contention, there were like four guys. It was Yoel Romero, there was Jacare, it was Rockhold, and Weidman, right? Those were the guys that were kind of in that space. And you're like, I don't know how he's going to leapfrog these guys. And so you didn't really take him seriously until he was doing it. This is almost like the du Plessis thing. I think that he was discounted because you could look back to the Whittaker fight 3 fights ago, and I think that people were like, that's the ledge too far. That's the one where he's going to be humbled, brought down to earth, whatever you want to say, like his streak will end, because we'd seen him looking just like, unchecked momentum going in there against guys like Brunson and getting by with it. We thought that he would get settled, that kind of reckless look would get settled. And so we just discount him. It's weird because then he goes through that fight, he starts getting the recognition, and then the Strickland fight was a close one, but a kind of brilliant one in a weird way too. Like he was able to perform in that fight, and then he goes here. It's been a weird ride, and I think that what he's proven is that he's been good all along. It just maybe looks different than we're used to, right? The aesthetic, the way he's doing it, but such a good fighter IQ. And I think he kind of outsmarts some of his opponents, man. That's what it looks like to me. Like he wears them down, confounds them a little bit, puts it in his wheelhouse whenever he wants to, and he gets by. But I think he's proven now that he's a worthy champion. Like he's a real champion, and we should appreciate him that way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big lessons I took from this one was there were people out there that were like, okay, he beat Whittaker, that was nice. But they feel like some folks feel like he got away with one against Strickland. And that fight was close. I mean, there's really no denying. It was very, very close. But that Izzy was going to be the one to sort of restore order to the division. And in fact, the opposite really happened. He was the guy who, the fight was also fun and competitive up until it basically wasn't. But that he was the guy that showed you, no, he's the best in class right now. This is the guy. And I was really thinking about this. I'm like, how is it possible? Like yesterday morning, I get on social media and it's filled with people mocking him. It's filled with people showing him throwing goofy ass punches that don't land anywhere, or blitzing with like his not quite his chin up, but like being vulnerable in a certain way. And like this was the discussion after the fact, and I'm like, I'm not saying that those things on camera you're not noticing them. You are seeing them; they are real. But like, let's take a moment to step back here a minute. For all of the highlights you see of him, let's say lunging or running at someone. How often are any of these other world-class fighters, former champion Strickland, former champion Whittaker, former champion Izzy, how many, and other good fighters before that, how many times do you ever see him being forced to pay for it? Like when he comes through, they get out of the way. It's part of what he is. He's so physical. He's so in your face. He's like a machete just clearing brush.
It is like that.
And they have to kind of just get out of the way when he swings, which is part of it. But the other part is this, and it doesn't show up necessarily like in any individual skill, but you brought up something, and I'm so glad you did. To me, Chuck, what I see when I hear him talk, both at the post-fight press conference as well as beforehand, he had said beforehand, I thought Izzy had an off night against Strickland, then I fought him and I realized there was more to it. And then afterwards, he had talked about, like Izzy was fighting a certain way for 2 minutes, and then the 2 minutes would be over, and then he would charge and take over. And that wasn't quite true in the third, but it was certainly true in most of the other rounds. he has a certain awareness about what is working, what is not, and whether it is pretty and whether it is balanced, and these things are important to a degree, is not the most consequential part. The part is, does this work? When does it work? How does it work? And he systematically applies it in such a physical way that, look at the results. He keeps getting his hand raised.
It's true, and he mixes it up. You know, it's funny. We talk about that Strickland fight. It was a close fight. I think Strickland outstruck him by like 40 strikes. Strickland had the edge in certain ways, but the mixing in, what was it, 6 takedowns? It's kind of what you're saying. Like, I think he reads the situations and he changes things and he takes it to another spot. We saw him in this fight as soon as he started getting pieced up, which he did a little bit, like in the third
round. He got
third round, and then in the fourth a little bit. You know, that lunging thing you're talking about, just kind of moving forward and taking taking it to him. It worked, and you're right. He doesn't really get caught on that, and that's where I think when I was looking at this fight specifically, I was like, he's been able to get by with that a couple of times with the other guys, but I think Izzy being kind of a sniper, who's a counter sniper, like especially coming off the back foot, like the way he. The way he stood in there and knocked out Alex Pereira, I was like, you could see a scenario where maybe he catches a guy coming in all officially trying to caveman him or something like that. It just never happened. It was very strange. And I think that goes into his fighter IQ. It's funny. You analyze fights a lot and watch it, but I pay attention a lot to what they're saying. And he was, I heard him saying, like, Izzy, he was breaking down Izzy. He was like, he doesn't really throw combinations. He throws punches with, he was breaking him down in a way that you understood that he knew what he was doing. And all of those things that we kind of accuse him of being reckless with are very, they're very methodical, I think, very strategic. And he understood, I think he fully understood, like, whoever was initiating contact in the exchanges was winning the fight. It was pointed out in the broadcast, but that was legit. And every time he lunged in, I felt like he was catching him. It was, I think that he's a harder puzzle to solve for the guys facing him than people realize.
For me, there were lots of people, Long Island Luke can attest to this too, people telling him this when he was betting. There were so many people, Chuck, and I'm sure you saw this in the lead up to the fight. They were saying things like, oh, this is the kind of guy that Izzy feasts on.
Right.
He's another bruiser like Paulo Costa. If there's any takeaway from this fight, and this should have been obvious beforehand, but now it is simply undeniable. This is not another version of Paulo Costa.
No.
This is not another version of...
I never saw that, but
fair enough. Nor am I suggesting as much, but that there was some belief hanging out there. And listen, I've been a guy who's been a long time supporter of Izzy. I had a slight lean. I thought he might win, but in no way was it true beforehand, and it is clearly not true now. Are there technical deficiencies in his game? Of course, there are in anyone's game. His, to some extent, do appear to be quite noticeable at times. However, number one, the fight IQ is ridiculous. It's his assessment of, like, what is the principal task at hand that I have to solve? Very good. Number two, we cannot lose sight of this. Izzy on the ground, it's always been almost only defense all the time.
Right.
He locked up a triangle on Kelvin Gastelum, which he used for a reversal at one point.
That's a great point.
But like Anderson Silva would finish fights from down there. And for him, it's always been the floor is lava. I think that plays with his ability to have reactions. That's the second part I would say. Dude, Dricus du Plessis can win on the ground. He took Izzy down. I don't know if he took Brunson down, but he took Till down, even in a goofy-ass way. But he took Whittaker down. Like, all these guys, Whittaker, Izzy, he takes them all down. And then the last part I'd say is, dude, he is physical. He's a goddamn tank. And he's durable. He's hard to hurt. Ask a question. In certain fights, I think the one he had in KSW against Roberto Soldic. Remember that guy?
Yes, of course.
And Soldic stopped him.
Yeah.
Since then, when was the last
time?
welterweight
fight, wasn't
Say
it?
again?
It was a welterweight fight, too.
Back in the day, yeah.
Crazy.
Since then, have you seen guys land on Dricus in the UFC? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But like this idea that he's like wide open to be hit. Well, if he's wide open to be hit, how did two of the best champions in the last 10 years at middleweight fail to really capitalize on that? Because the tape is somewhat, and I would argue, a little misleading.
Yes. There's so much to it, man. Like, he uses his length in terms of moving forward. He uses his length. So I point this out not to kind of diminish him, but actually I thought Forrest Griffin's, but one of the best things he used to do was he would use his full arm length as he was coming forward. He would just kind of throw these punches. And it would have been it was hard for people to handle just given his size. And I feel like I see a little bit of that with Du Plessis too. Like you can just see guys. He didn't get enough credit for kind of landing on Strickland. Strickland's a hard guy to hit. You know, he's very elusive. People don't really. I mean, I think they think of the Alex Pereira knockout and they're like, oh well, he's he could be knocked out.
He learned from that.
He learned from that, and he doesn't get hit. That Izzy could barely find him. You know, it's like, but you could see that Dricus he could hit him, and that. So to me, I was like, it's just it's fun to watch because he's adapting. I think in real time as he's fighting an opponent. I think he also game plans really well, but I think he's able to kind of say, I know it's going to work here, or whatever it is. He always has a plan. He's fluid with his plan A, plan Bs, and plan Cs, as some people don't even have a plan B. And I think that just shows, man. I think there's just more to him than people wanted to realize coming into this fight. Do you think you as a guy who analyzes fights, when you're watching him, especially against Brunson, because I remember it looked like he looked like, I always say, it looked like a toddler who got hit and got activated, and he's like coming down a hill because he was just forward, chasing him around. Do you think there's been an evolution in that, or do you think there's like when he's in those moments where he's just kind of charging forward, where he's fully in control of himself?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Honestly, okay, so heading into the Whittaker fight, I was definitely on, who is this goofball's going to get corrected here? And then he goes and stops Whittaker, and I was like, okay, well, it's time to rethink everything you thought about this. And then again, you still see some of these things where he's lunging and off balance, or like, for example, there was a takedown, I think the takedown in the second round, he just kind of falls on the legs of Izzy and it works. And it's like, here's my response to people who say that, like, is that the technical way to take somebody down?
Right.
No, it is not. My response would be, do you think that's the first time he's ever tried that? No.
Right.
I guarantee he has tried this kind of lunging, using his weight, using his physicality, where to wrap exactly to take him down. He is very, very physically strong and imposing, but then finds ways with his own dynamism, whatever you want to call it, to make it work. And honestly, we've seen this in UFC before. It's very, very different. There's many differences. But Tim Sylvia was a heavyweight champion. Now, he was huge, and he had a number of advantages, both in terms of his reach and his height. He was hard to hit. And he was not, Dricus is actually a very good athlete, but Tim Sylvia, a little bit goofy. But dude, this guy knocked out Rigo Rodriguez. He became a champion. He actually beat some good guys along the way. Imagine if he was actually athletic.
I know.
And now what you can do when you're decently well-rounded, Dricus to me feels like a very, 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 very improved version
That's interesting.
of what Tim Sylvia was trying to be. Does that make sense?
I think it's also just, for him to be, like, his natural way of being may just look awkward to us. Like, it may just look awkward to aesthetics that are common in the fight game, right? Like, he just does things a little differently. That first takedown attempt, it looked like he tripped. It wasn't the case. It kind of goes to your point, what you were just saying. Like, it looked like he kind of tripped and fell into his legs. He didn't complete the takedown, but it looked like he just fell onto his legs in that one too. Very strange, but I think that's kind of just who he is. That's his range of motion. I'm always a little hesitant to talk about Tim Sylvia because I did a piece where I quoted Monty Cox, his old man. I quoted Monty Cox, who was like, my big piece of shit is now the champion of the UFC. He was quoting, like, back in the day, his thoughts when he became a champion, and they used it as a pull quote in a piece I wrote, and Tim Sylvia saw it, and he got all pissed. He thought I'm like, that's a pull quote from your own guy. I didn't say that, but he wanted to beat me up. I still like my chances against him, but he wanted to beat me up at that time.
Well, that's very common among fighters. They have they're not known as the least sensitive group that's ever been. But okay, nevertheless, as I indicated to me, the big takeaway just being that, like, if Dricus probably will continue to have doubters, especially if he goes up to 205, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But I feel like this fight really solidified the end of he's just lucking his way through this. Like, you don't get this far lucking your way through this. By the way, he's been enjoying the victory lap here. I want to post, if we can, Long Island Luke.
Yeah, he is.
The tweet he sent to Drake, the rapper who's been getting his ass handed to him. Drake had, I think, bet like something like 500 grand, some enormous. What was it, Long Island Luke?
God, I don't even know. I want to say 500.
Yeah, some enormous amount of money. And afterwards, he sent him a text saying, "From the bottom of my heart, once again, thank you," in all caps, Drake.
Oh my God.
By the way, went after Brendan Schaub, sent him a couple of tweets calling him nasty things. Then today went after Darren Till, called him a bunch of
I
names,
saw that one.
and went after Steve Erceg,
Saw
calling
that
him
one.
a 6 out of 10 because that's what Erceg had
Yes.
called him ahead of time.
Yeah.
Do you like victory lap Dricus? How do you
Hell
feel
yes.
about it?
Dude, I love it, man. I mean, come on. He's weirdly good at this. Like, he's weirdly good at harnessing his grudges. Isn't he?
Strickland
Like,
was
I know.
crying. Izzy was
very good.
Was very emotional. Like, there's something about what Dricus does that doesn't immediately pop off. But then you look at the outcomes and you're like, Jesus Christ.
He gets under people's skins. Like, I love it, man. Like, and that's part of it, right? Like, if anybody ever snuck up into a position, it was him. Like, I don't think we fully understood who Dricus du Plessis was as he kind of came into the limelight, and especially as he's, wins the title and all this. So he's still kind of showing off like who he is. He's still kind of peeling back the layers. It's a lot of fun, man. I love a guy like this. I love a guy who's like, the fight game needs that sort of thing. I think it makes it better. When a guy's like doing this kind of victory lap and he's like rubbing it in people's faces, it shows a personality. You got to kind of understand the subtleties within his personality, but he is certainly starting to come into that light. I think in the lead up to this fight, it was a little bit weird, right? Because you thought there was going to be huge bad blood between these guys. That's what they were kind of promoting it as. Like, these guys hate each other for reasons, of the African thing. But obviously, like, we know that the broader implications of what was going on, we didn't know if it was going to turn really, really crazy. It really didn't. And part of that, I think, was because of du Plessis. I don't know if he wants to actually play the certain games. He likes to play a mind game, but it's not like that exactly. So I just feel like we're learning about him, man, and it's been kind of fun.
I have to say, like, Dricus fights, are you bored? You're never
No.
bored.
I've never seen
Now,
it.
I guess the Strickland fight is one that you could maybe make the argument, but that's like absent that, where you have a
Yeah.
very unique style. That's Sean Strickland is the king of trench warfare, right?
Yeah.
Where we're putting up a line and I lob and then you lob, then I lob, then you lob, and you have to kind of count who's
Right.
got the most lobs at the end. But short of that, look at Dricus's fights. And sometimes, again, he's pulling Darren Till right on top
I
of
know.
him. Okay, fair enough. But they're not short on calamity. They're not short
Sure.
on action.
Well, it feels like, it feels reckless. And it also, he initiates contact, right? Like, I feel like he's not a guy, like, if you got the wrong matchup where they're just going to patty cake through 5 rounds. I just don't feel like he'll ever do
No.
that. I feel like he would initiate action at some point and probably very early in that fight.
He never is in a place where he's like, okay, this is good enough.
Yeah.
He's always in a place like, okay, that's good. Can we get more? Can we get more? Can we get more? And dude, he just fucking knocks on the door. What's
I
his
know.
name? Still knocks?
Still knocks.
He's still fucking knocking
Still
at the
knocking.
door.
Yeah,
That's
man.
what he does. Now, you brought up something about the bad blood. There was an interesting moment after the fight, if we can, Long Island Luke, where the families met and Izzy was given this kind of jacket. I think it's got some relationship to South Africa. I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure. I don't really know, but it was certainly a gift to a rival, to an opponent, to former champion. And I got a question
Does
about
it
this.
warm your heart to see stuff like this?
I will say this about the fight game. How sincere this stuff is, you never know. Could be, couldn't be, you can decide. But my view on this is I saw some real cynical takes on this. And my view is, and here he is, I think he was trying to make amends with the parents about not really knowing their
Right.
story and everything. Because there was a lot about like, oh, they had servants
Yes,
growing
yeah.
up. And I'm like, have you guys been to the developed world? That is in no way rare whatsoever. But okay, I don't even want to litigate it. But the question I had for you was, I actually really like these. Again, not because I necessarily think that they are always sincere. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't.
Yeah.
However, the fight game has very few feel-good rituals where a winner tries to humble himself before the loser.
Yeah.
I actually feel like we should protect those traditions and we should be glad about them.
I'm always so torn on this thing.
Really?
Because, well, no, not that specifically, but like, I can't get enough of guys who hate each other either. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I love that aspect of it because
Even
it's-
after the fight?
well, I can appreciate when they do this. I think there is like this human moment where you're like, okay, the competition is over. They can shake hands. They can be buddies. I'm okay with it. But I also like it when the bad blood just rolls on because because it's the fight game and it's like
Chuck woke up and chose
Yeah.
violence.
but it's like, it all leads. The greatest thing was like in other sports, the ball's a metaphor. They're just going to go compete against each other and try, shoot baskets or whatever. But in this sport, they're going to punch each other. And there's something about it that revs up in its most literal form when they just can't stand each other.
Dude, I told you, I talked to this guy who wrestled D1, and he made this point to me years and years and years ago. And he always found it funny. He was like, dude,
Yeah.
after a wrestling match, we're talking like D1,
Mhm.
Penn State, Oklahoma State, 2 national champions facing off to see what happens. Like whatever, even if it's a pin or a close, doesn't matter. They'll shake hands, but it will be the most reluctant handshake of all time,
Yes.
right? He goes, in MMA, you'll get two former wrestlers who beat the shit out of each other, and then they'll embrace.
Right.
They'll have this spiritual experience. There is something different about hitting one another that the other sports cannot replicate that forces some of these traditions. I actually really kind of like this.
And there is, and I can, and you know, to evolve that, you're like, there is a brotherhood to having went to war. Like if we fought afterwards, you're like, well, we're always going to share that.
The two guys
you know,
in the ambulance,
I know
both in their
exactly.
gurneys, you know?
And all that stuff is very cool because, you know, you have something now in history books with this guy. You went to war with him. I can appreciate that sort of thing. And I think that I could appreciate what was happening in this too, because the bad blood was just so, it had the potential to be really ugly. And I'm glad it didn't get there, to be honest. But there was a part of me too that was like, I wanted to believe that there was going to be lingering bad blood. It's just part of the way you think of the fight game, you know?
There's a conversation we're going to have in just a minute about what should be next for DDP. But before we do that, we do have to talk about Israel Adesanya. Adesanya.
Yeah.
I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I don't
I literally do not know.
Izzy.
How did he look to you?
He looked good. Okay, so it's kind of a complicated question because if you compare him straight up to his hungriest, his rawest, like when he was lifting his leg and spraying, you know, and beating guys like Wilkins, like when he was doing all that stuff and coming up, it just looked to me like he was not going to be denied. This was a hungry guy who you could tell was kind of bookmark, like he was going to be in big moments and he was going to thrive in them. And I think we saw that through the course of his run, all of his title defenses. Something's happened. I'm not sure what, but I just don't feel like he has that whole thing in him anymore. Sometimes you think, well, it's because he's evolved as a human being. Like he just sees the world differently. But you get the sense that he's kind of he's trying to rev himself back into that, but it's maybe not clicking like it did. It's just, I didn't feel like he was fully that same dog, man. You know? There's just something about it. I just didn't feel like he was fully himself in that fight.
I think he exercised a lot of demons knocking out Poatan, and I don't think he's been the same since personally. I think that was such a landmark achievement in his career that, I mean, let's actually back up a step. Like, let me tell you how I think he looked.
Okay.
I actually thought he looked physically prepared, right? I thought he looked in shape. He did not look in any way out of shape. He was breathing through his nose well into the fourth round, which is very, very difficult to do, right? So I thought he was like engaged. He looked pretty good. Does he look a step slower physically at 35 than he did at 31, 32? Yes, of course. But I didn't, did you, very quickly, did he look washed to you?
No.
I did not get the sense he looked. I had people being like,
I thought he was going to win. At third round on, I was like, he's going to win the fight.
He was. You know? He looked like he may have been on his way. One never knows, but he looked like he was. He performed quite ably, I think, is the way I would put that. But in retrospect and watching it again, I got the sense that this is a guy that has, I mean, heading into this contest, whether he won or whether he lost, it didn't matter. He's still the second best middleweight of all time.
Right.
Nothing changes from that. Even if he had beaten Dricus. Now, if he got in the belt a third time, he enters some kind of different history and it creates different opportunities, but it didn't really change his place at middleweight. He has achieved so much.
Yep.
And then you add in that crowning achievement over Poatan, and then add on top of that he's 35 years of age. He has well over 100 combat sports professional fights.
Crazy, man. You saw him in Glory back in the day, right? Like,
but before I even knew who he was.
Right.
And then the last thing I want to say is, dude, the fact that afterwards, this guy who has been full of vinegar and piss and motivation and hunger and drive seemed to be okay with the loss
right.
is incomprehensible to the other version. And I want to be clear, I am not in any way trying to be insulting. I am not. What I am saying is, even the guys who are this good, they have expiration dates. And I don't know whether he knows it, but I feel like watching from afar, Chuck, I feel like he has entered a different phase of his life. And I don't know if fighting should be a part of it anymore. What else is there left to do? And if you don't have that hunger and you're this age,
that's the whole thing.
What are we doing here?
There was like something about his easy resolve with it that was weird.
It was too easy.
I know, it was too easy.
He was way too accommodating of it.
And also, like, you know, even the words he was using, you know, through his run had such gravity, right? Like he was saying things differently, seeing things differently. And he was even saying, like, I manifested this, you know. After this, he was like, I didn't manifest this.
Yeah.
Which is this weird thing that you're almost like, it's just so out of the personality of this alpha dog that you've known for so long. Like now there's almost a comic undertone to it or something. And I'm like, I don't know. It just I think you're dead on right though with the Poatan thing, because we had this discussion, and in fact, I sometimes think he took this discussion because we had a discussion about whose story is it. Remember, whose story is this?
Ultimately, whose story is it? Yes.
He kind of has been talking about that since then. He's been like, "Whose story? It's my story. It's my story now." And I have no idea if he actually got it from watching our show.
It is very possible.
It is possible though, and I was like, because it became like such a chief part of his narrative about reclaiming his story, an identity thing, you know. And he was even saying it going into this one, and I think that Poatan thing, because it got so crazy. You know, he's 0-3 basically. If you go back to the kickboxing, he's going in that last fight. It got so crazy for him that he was being erased because this guy was the bane of his existence, coming to take everything from him, you know. And all of a sudden, he knocks him out. I do think you're right. I think that was kind of like the peak you were going to see. And I thought that was some of the most OG stuff I'd ever seen when he did that. And he shot him with the arrows and all, and the way he talked. It was so good. And I feel like now, kind of looking at it, that was probably the peak of what we got.
How
from
can you
era.
do that and then at 35 with a year off reclaim that fire? I just don't know how. I don't know if that's possible. Now, he was asked at the post-fight press conference to assess his own performance. Long Island Luke, this is the one where he says, "I was winning basically until I wasn't."
Right.
Let's see what he says.
I'm more happy with this fight than my last fight because again, I performed, I showcased myself. I felt great, man. I felt great. So again, I wasn't really, like I said, I wasn't hanging on the result. I just wanted to showcase myself, and I felt like I did that tonight. In my eyes, I was winning the fight until I wasn't. So yeah, as long as I performed, I made myself proud. I just don't like the result. But again, I'm not hanging on the result. I'm just proud of with how I performed.
It reminds me of this quote from Sean Connery. Ever seen the movie The Rock in 1996?
Yeah, I've seen it.
And Nicolas Cage turns to him and goes, "I'll do my best." And he turns around and he goes, "Your best." Your best. He goes, what did he say? He goes,
That's pretty good.
He says, I forget exactly how he said it, but his point is, your best is one thing. He goes, winners go home and fuck the prom queen. And he goes, Carla was the prom queen.
Dude, that's hilarious. You know Max Bradhouse?
Yes. Oh, I love Max.
So Max, like, next time you run across him, ask him to do a Sean Connery. He ran into him on the golf course. It's just funny. Yours is pretty damn good, but he's got a funny one too.
But my point being is, I understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
He didn't even look like himself against Strickland. Yes. He wanted to erase that. And he didn't want to hang on the result. Like, all of this is emotionally stable. What I'm trying to make is, that's an adult thing to say.
Right.
That's a rational thing to say. That's a smart thing to say. That's not necessarily great for competing.
Right.
That's where I'm at.
No, I agree with you 100%. That's what I'm saying. Like that kind of stuff. Like, you use the word inconceivable. I think that's you. If you were comparing it to the guy who was making his run, and just the way he looked at the fight game, the way he looked at almost like a primal way of looking at fighting, where he was going to go in there and you were trying to steal from his plate. You know, it's come a long ways from there. So I think that at this point, I don't know if we get that Izzy back. I think that people are clinging to him because I think that people, you can tell me what you think in the canon of, is he one of those guys who his legacy is certainly secure, but is he one of those guys that we're always going to be talking about, like one of the greats? It's a tough one because I don't think I think that this fight solidified, maybe the Strickland one first, that he's not a generational fighter. Because you look at a guy like Anderson Silva, 16-0 in the UFC to start, 10 title defenses. He was 38, I think, when he lost to Chris Weidman. 38. Like, imagine going that long. Like, that's when you compare it, right? Even though I think Izzy's strength of schedule was harder, but if you compare those things, you're like, that's more like generational stuff. That's the stuff that you'll always talk about until somebody's able to duplicate it. I don't think Izzy
I guess it will
there.
depend how long him being number 2 in terms of the best middleweights lasts. If that ends up being quite lasting, I think you could be wrong. On the other hand, if Dricus keeps winning, and he beats those records, it probably will be quite ephemeral. Yeah. Oh, by the way, here's the quote. Your best. Your best. Losers always whine about their best. Winners go home and fuck the prom queen. There you go. Huh? It's the worst Sean Connery impression you've ever heard.
No, you had the or whatever that thing is.
Last bit on this. Izzy is actually asked about Dricus and how he feels about him. This is what he says.
I'm sure losing to this guy stings a little bit more than they maybe normally would.
Yeah.
How desperate are you to get this one back, and how are you going to carry that disappointment moving forward?
I'm not really desperate to get it back. I haven't like he gave me a lot of respect in there, and I gave him his respect back. And I already knew he was a fan of me. I knew he was a fan of me, but I guess now I'm a fan of his because we've been in there, we've done it. And when I'm in South Africa, I'll tap in with him. But I said, look, we can hang out, but just so you know, when we have to fight again, I'm gonna kill you. He's like, I'm gonna kill you too. So yeah, it's the respect is always there. And Dricus is an African champion, but you know, the three kings will reign supreme. That era right there was what set this off for people like him. And he's going to inspire another generation of African fighters as well. So congrats to him tonight. Yeah, till we meet again.
There's actually a significant amount of truth to this.
Yeah.
Obviously, Dricus' career was already in motion before any of those, the original three kings, Kamaru Usman, Francis Ngannou, and Izzy, were
you can't say
champions.
Francis, but yes, I know who you
Sorry, Francis, never heard of this guy before. But the reality is, and I'll tell the truth about this, and people should really understand this, one of the hotbeds in African MMA has been for quite some time South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
They have had something of a local scene there, and guys have come out of it. PFL has Don Madge. Trevor Prangley came out of South Africa a long time ago. Remember Trevor Prangley versus Yuki Kondo? And then everyone was shouting USA, USA. I'm like, he's South African, you fucks. You fucking morons. This was in the United States. But the point I'm trying to make is he is the culmination of that. But I do believe that those guys becoming champion, now Dricus becoming champion, it does shine a light on, I think, a very underserved world in professional mixed martial arts.
Yeah, 100%. And I pointed this out when we were doing the other show, the Ringer show. Like, they've been talking about South Africa, the UFC, for years. I remember this so specifically. There was, it was almost like the Dallas. When are you going to go to Dallas Cowboys Stadium? Somebody was always asking, when are you guys going to go to South Africa? And I remember Mike Straka, of all people, saying something to Dana. This had to have been 10 years ago. Like, hey, are the plans for South Africa going to happen? This is like probably 2012. And he's like, within the year, he was basically pointing out that they wanted to get there within the next year. So look at that. It's just crazy that we're in 2024 and still they haven't really made headway over there. Even though, like you mentioned, there are fighters coming from over there now. They got a champion from over there.
Dricus deserves a fight in South Africa.
He does, 100%. If they're ever going to do it, it would be
This is now.
Yeah.
He beat two of the best guys of the last 10 years, finished them both. Dricus du Plessis deserves a fight in South Africa.
I was thinking about that too, that gauntlet, right? Like you look at anybody's path through this, but to go through Whittaker, Strickland, and now Izzy is just, that's a hard 3-pack right there. Most times, you're looking at these and you're like, well, you got one guy that was kind of a gimme in there. These were all fights I think most people thought he might lose, and he's won them all. So, I mean, like, he's a deserving champion, and I hope they do celebrate him that way.
All right, speaking about what's next, let's go to question number 2. Chuck, a very simple one. Now that Dricus is, in fact, your champion, the question becomes, well, then what and who is next? Now, UFC President Dana White has said it's going to be Sean Strickland, but we don't really have any announcement or any great assurances of that. There is some talk, obviously, this upcoming bout and rematch, or a rebooked fight anyway, between Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev. There is also the Alex Pereira equation. Poetan tweeting that he would, or at least putting on social media, that he'd be willing to go. Do we have that graphic? That he'd be willing to go down to 185 again.
I love this dude.
And this was, I think, him trying to flex.
That's the happiest I've ever seen him look. By
I know. I mean, this is him jizzing. Look at that! Look at that! Look at his orgasm face. Just absolute DMV photo time. Okay, we can get to the 205 part here a little bit first. Assuming it is a 185 title fight, Chuck, what makes the most sense for him and 185?
I would have a hard time saying that Whittaker shouldn't have, but it's weird, right? Because this is one of those conditional things. He has a fight coming up in Abu Dhabi. We think. I feel like this is a hypothetical fight until you actually see Chimaev and Whittaker actually fight. But I would have a hard time telling Whittaker, who has only lost to Izzy and du Plessis, right, over the course of 10 years. That's the only guys he's lost to, and he's fought everybody else and he's beat them. I'd have a hard time saying to him, you don't get it if he beats Chimaev. The only problem is I don't know if the UFC will want. I don't know their schedule. It sometimes feels like they want guys to be more active. They might want du Plessis to be like in there beforehand. Maybe they don't want to wait that timetable out. In that case, they've already kind of promised Strickland I don't really love it. Like, I don't really need to. You tell me. Do you want to see that rematch right away? I feel like it wouldn't have the pop that some of these other potential fights could do.
So this question is uniquely interesting because it is like the most what choice do you make among MMA choices ever? Because if we're just looking meritocratically, I do believe that Sean Strickland deserves a rematch.
Okay.
I really, really do. However, that fight is going to be not great in all likelihood. In all likelihood, it'll be boring.
And I feel like that factors in so much to their decision. But
and also, if Khamzat Chimaev wins, and let's say blows, I mean, I don't think he will, but let's say he blows the doors off Robert Whittaker, dude.
Well,
fresh matchup, somebody that the UFC has been like waiting to kind of like turn.
Sure.
Or let's say Robert Whittaker goes in there and does to Khamzat what he did to Ikram Aliskerov. You're like, dude, this is an easy call.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What matters to you more? The entertainment kind of freshness value, or hey, this guy is clearly the most deserving.
Yeah. And I mean, and honestly, like Chimaev winning, would that make him the most deserving? I guess because he's going through Whittaker.
It would not make him the most deserving.
Right. But
it would make him the most attractive.
At least you would have the argument, right? Like, but I do think that Whittaker would have, if he beat Chimaev, I mean, like, he'd be hard to deny. That's the one thing I'd say. Like, he would deserve it above everybody else. I do think like Strickland probably has the inside track on it. It would make no sense right now for Du Plessis to fight Alex Pereira, who also has a fight coming up anyway. But it would make very little sense for them to fight. Like, you have guys, like you're the new champion. You don't need a guy to come back from another division to fight you right now, or you don't need to jump up in a division. Plant that for later though, because that is kind of a fun idea. You know, it's a fight that we haven't really contemplated until just all of a sudden Saturday night. You know, so I feel like it's a fun place to be. I think that so many of us, I don't know how you were thinking of it. I was almost contemplating almost exclusively the Izzy side of the coin going into this fight. You're like, well, what happens? Does Izzy fight this, or does he do this? And all of a sudden it's Du Plessis, and it kind of opens things up. Whittaker, especially though, I think is like he's kind of like that Max Holloway situation where it's like now he has a clearing. He has a clearing back to a title fight, right? And I feel like that's important for a guy who is still there. Like, he's still that good, but he was never going. I didn't feel like he was ever going to get it again with Izzy. It would have to be, it was going to have to be extraordinary circumstances for him to actually fight Izzy again. So he's got that path at least back to it.
I'll say this too: even if Whittaker wins, I mean, it goes back to this question of like, what is the UFC value? They typically don't value people sitting out and waiting.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes, like for example, Dana White has already said we're going to give it to Strickland, but they always favor the person who elects to stand up and then take the thing and then do them a solid. They always kind of tend to favor that.
Except for Tom Aspinall in the John Jones situation, but yes.
Which is the most what the fuck are they doing situation I've ever fucking seen.
It makes no sense, man.
It is. I mean, I don't know what compromise that John Jones has on Dana White for this to be the case. But the point I'm trying to make here is one thing to really consider is like we didn't think about DDP versus Poatan. I want to talk about in just a second. Something else that I felt like after Saturday was, hey, listen, if Whittaker goes in there and blows the doors off Khamzat, maybe he should be the guy. Do I really believe in his chances against DDP?
Right.
I got to tell you, I'm not sure I do anymore. Right. I really,
it's funny.
Even after I know he got finished and like, oh, that's enough evidence. But like finishing him, beating Strickland, close, but beating Strickland, finishing Izzy, I'm like, can Whittaker even get this job done? I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And it's crazy because, like I said, he has been nothing but good, but he didn't. I mean, he got beat pretty badly in that Du Plessis fight. So it's like, in a weird way, you're like, if you're looking at a rematch, it's the same thing. I think that you might, if you held them both up, rematches, I think the Strickland one would present more danger to him, to Du Plessis. Don't you agree? I think if you looked at him in prospect, you'd be like, well.
Danger, I don't know, but like, at risk of losing.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant.
Okay,
risk of losing. Like, I think that would be the fight that would probably have the line, like the odds line closest, because it would be hard to predict.
Excuse me. One other thing I want to sort of point out here. This was a little bit true of Izzy, not quite, but a little bit true. It was a lot true, but it's even more true about Dricus. When Izzy was coming up and he was beating the Rob Wilkinsons and then Brad Tavares of the world, there were lots of people being like, this guy's a fucking bum. He's going to lose. He's going to get exposed. And then he just kept winning all the way to a title. Dricus has kind of benefited a little bit because people, including me, I did it well into the Whittaker fight. And I've since learned my lesson. But heading into that Whittaker fight, I'm like, this fucking guy, hey, all right, he's big and strong, but whatever.
Right.
And so I don't think people have taken him seriously. But now that people are kind of forced to contend with that he is this guy, I think there's going to be a lot more examination about the details of his game and a lot more examination about the mechanics of why, or the realities about why he wins. And that's going to put a target on his back in a way where now you're going to really see him audited, maybe not by the best competition. There's a debate about that, but I just want to point that out. Like, he has benefited from the fact, like, that goofball,
I know.
he ain't going to do shit. And then he just, now he's here and you're like, well, maybe he's not a fucking goofball anymore, you know?
And I mean, you know how, revisionist MMA audiences, like if he were to lose the next one, whoever he fights, he just loses, maybe he gets knocked out. I think people would actually go back to that a little bit. They would 100% go back, especially he came in kind of charging the thing we're talking about and boom, he gets hit and just collapses. I mean, people would be like, well, he's reckless. He got by with it for a while,
Yeah.
That's going to happen if he gets knocked out.
I actually love the idea of him fighting Poatan. I actually think it's a very compelling
At
fight.
205 or...
Let's talk about that. Dricus spoke to the media about this very question, about whether he would fight him, and if so, at what weight class. This is what he said.
Obviously, I know Dana White said that Sean Strickland deserves the next title shot, but I don't know if you saw that Alex Pereira posted that he wants to drop back down to middleweight too. He was sitting in front of like you getting the belt tonight.
Look at that face.
What do you want next for your career?
Yeah, what I want next is whatever they give me. I have to be honest there. I honestly don't think Alex Pereira should drop down to 185. If he wants to, great, perfect. But then we're going to hear the excuses. I saw we saw Izzy stiff that man in the first round. I felt Izzy's punching power tonight. If that, Izzy has great timing. He's fast, he's long, and he has great combinations. But I felt the power. If Izzy stiffens you like that, you do not want to be in there with me, especially not when you're going to come in there with the excuses, no, I cut too much weight. That's going to happen. Everybody's going to say that. So stay at 205, fight your fight against the number 7 ranked guy.
Number 8.
Oh, number 8. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, fight your fight there and enjoy it. If Strickland's the next fight, the people want to see that fight. That's the fight that people want to see. And that's the fight right now that people think is the next best guy. Then it's the fight that I want. So let me handle my business. You handle your business. You don't have to cut the weight so you have some sort of excuse. I'll come up after the Strickland fight. I'll come up to 205 and we'll sort it out there.
Got to tell you.
So much to love.
Got to tell you. I love the idea of Dricus at 205, and I'm not making any predictions right now to have to think about if they ever made it, about who would win. Do I think that Dricus can beat Poatan at 205? I absolutely do think he could. I absolutely think he could. Guys, look at how physical he is. You're going to give him you're going to bump him up 20 pounds. And I'm sorry, but Poatan's wrestling is extremely untested.
True.
This guy,
I think the UFC prefers it that way. Actually.
Yeah, I think that they do. We'll have a conversation about that later. But I'm just pointing out, like, this idea, on the feet, might he get thumped? Yeah, he might get thumped.
Yeah.
But the well-roundedness, the physicality of it is so fucking dumb to keep dismissing this guy.
Dude, but the greatest thing too is like we were talking about like him kind of psychologically steering things. He just did it. Like you're just watching him do it in real time. If you're going to get under somebody's skin and really plant the seeds for something, that's the way to do it, right? Like he was doing it. That's pretty masterful off the cuff.
Go fight your
right
number 7. Sorry, we're hearing it's actually number 8. Oh,
I love it.
Even better.
I love it.
This guy is amazing.
It's it's very subtly like just jabbing. Even when it's just he's always doing that.
By the way, we got to get to something else here. I just want to bring this up. Long Island Luke, did you see the fucking cornermen that Dricus brought to the cage on Saturday?
Yes, the rugby guys, they were huge.
So I want you to Google this while I do this DK read. The guy, there was 2 guys. One was a black guy, one was a white guy. I don't know who they are, but I know the white guy's name. He was the biggest of the 2. His name is Etzebeth something, E-T-Z-E Beth, B-E-T-H.
Uh-huh.
I looked this guy's stats up. He's 6'9". Dude, these countries that are good at rugby and like the guys who would play in our NBA or NFL, they put them into the fucking rugby pipeline. They are the most intimidating motherfuckers.
I saw 'em, man.
They were doing fist poses and it looked like Dricus was a Make-A-Wish kid next to like a real professional athlete.
They would never be able to cut down to 265.
I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Do you have a picture of him? You getting it?
Yeah, I'll get it in a second.
All right, let me do this read then if we can here very quickly. By the way, just want everyone to know, this show airs on the DraftKings Network every Monday, I believe at 5 p.m. So shouts to DraftKings and the DraftKings Network. And I also want to say, in a world of slot reels and blackjack deals, Chuck Mindenhall, comes the must-play event of the summer from DraftKings Casino, featuring nonstop action and an all-star cast of games, including A-Lister, Loki's Luck. The summer blockbuster is the one you don't want to miss. So, new players can get $100 instantly in casino credits with just a $1 wager, and all players get a blockbuster bonus every week. So, sign up with the code COMBAT, that's COMBAT with a K, and grab your popcorn. It's showtime on DraftKings Casino.
Make some coin, baby.
You know, I get triggered when they say the word showtime because the death of Showtime changed my life in ways that I've yet to recover from.
This, yes.
Do you have that picture yet? He's getting it up.
Give me a couple minutes.
I'll give you a couple of minutes. Okay, Chuck. With that in mind, then let's do this. Here, I'm gonna get my notes back up because I had to change everything. God damn it! All right, let's talk about the co-main event here, if we can, just a little bit.
All right.
And then we'll get to this picture of this guy. All right, let's do topic number 3. Kai Kara France, Chuck, blew the goddamn doors off of Steve Erceg after a long layoff. He had concussion issues. Remember, he was supposed to fight Manel Cobb.
Yeah.
And that whole thing. And it was, of course, in Saturday's co-main event. There is not a ton of discussion to be had about the flyweight division, but there is some, so we should have it, which is, does this make Kai Kara France the prohibitive next title contender at 125?
I thought it was a great performance. That's okay. Now you're looking at like you're doing the MMA math where you're like, well, Erceg just got a shot after 3 fights in the UFC, gets 1 knockout over Schnell, and ends up fighting Pantoja for the belt in Brazil. Well, you just beat the guy. You know what I mean? Like, you beat Erceg, who was put in that spot. In some way, you're like, that makes sense. Even though he had a couple losses, one of them was a split decision, but he had a couple losses before this, meaning Kai Kara France. I think a name value, and this division to me, than any other division, feels like such a dealer's choice. It just whoever the UFC kind of wants to go with. You know, it's like, I feel like you can throw the
dealer's choice all the time.
It always, but you're right. It's more and more so.
But
like
more
that.
so in this
but
division.
In this division, I feel like we could say all this stuff, and they'll pick the 8th guy, like the 8th ranked guy, and throw him in there, and you're like, oh, I guess that's who they're going with. Like, Erceg made no sense for the title shot. They just needed an event, and it's kind of strange because this thing to me always ties into. You have Albazi, but you have guys like Muhammad, right? Like Makayev, and like he was out there as a young guy that had a name and at least a little buzz, but he's now not even in this running. And if you take all that into account, I'm like, well, Kai Kara France has a name. He has some big wins in his career. I think that you could look at him and say, like, yes, it's justifiable to put him into that, especially after this performance. I wasn't sure how that fight would look. I thought Erceg, because he's a really good counter puncher, and once he kind of dials in, he's very precise striker. That might pay dividends, but he took all of that out of it, man. He looked like a buzzsaw in there.
I mean, just look at these rankings, right? Which I don't know what the value of them is anymore, but they provide at least some kind of arrangement.
All it is. Yeah.
So you've got Pantoja as the champion. He's looking for someone. They gave Erceg that fight. I mean, I can just tell you they gave Erceg that fight because they were desperate for someone to headline. So they needed that. That's why he got it. Not that he's not good. Even with this loss, he's still quite good, but obviously that was why they did it. Okay, so number 1 ranked contender is Brendan Royval. We've already been there. He could get back there, but he would not be the obvious one. Then there's Brendan Moreno, similar kind of situation.
And taking time off, right? Like
exactly, which he needed to. I don't have any objections with that. 3 is Amir Albazi. Now that to me is the interesting one. He's been off for some time, so I don't know exactly what his availability is. But he would be a very viable candidate.
And I think he has the victory, right, over Kai Kara France. So you could, if you're doing it in any kind of logical way, you'd look at that.
Albazi's legit.
Yeah.
Then there's Kai Kara France, whatever. And then below that, you got him coming up in a fight. Tetsuro Taira's got a fight coming up. Then there's Perez, Erceg, Nicolau, Kopp, and Tim Elliott. Okay.
Right.
It has to be Kai Kara France.
I think so.
It has to be. Who else would it even be at this point?
I mean, was Pantoja like kind of like teasing out? Oh, he's got the picture. Was he teasing out though, like real quick, like was he teasing out that he had like a special, like there's going to be an announcement about his fight? My son had brought this up, and I'm not 100% sure if it's accurate, but
I don't recall.
But I was like, unless they have like an ace up their sleeve, and I don't know what that would be. You know, who would it be? Like they're bringing back Demetrius Johnson or something. But I'm like, unless they're going to do something drastic from the outside that we can't see, I think Kai Kara France makes the most sense.
What went wrong for Steve Erceg on Saturday?
part of it, man, is like he's one of those guys that I think the title shot actually kind of detoured a natural trajectory for him.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you said this. Go ahead, please.
But no, seriously, I mean, like I think it threw him into a situation that was big, and he had to kind of. I mean, there were whole promo packages they were putting together to familiarize the audience to Steve Erceg, and it was just one of those weird things. That was a tough gig, but now it was 3 months later, 3.5 months later, he shows up in a still a very escalated kind of way against a guy like Kai France, not getting a soft landing here. Like he had to fight a guy who is very good and has tons of veteran experience, and it kind of showed, man. And I'm not sure if it's just that he was too, overwhelmed. He's like, he's drinking out of the fire hose or whatever that old proverb is. Like, I'm not sure it's something like that where it's all coming so fast. But he looked like, he was kind of starting to dial in with his striking a little bit, but just looked like he was overmatched overall. It just looked like he wasn't going to be able to hang long term in that fight.
I had a bit of a different read, which was I fully agree. First of all, the Pantoja fight was brutal, and it was only 3 months ago. People forget that it was late May.
I know that's
a little more than 3.
Yeah, 301.
Yep. Basically, let's see. So there's end of June, end of July, end of August.
3 months.
Basically 3 fucking months. For a brutal fight, that is a very quick turnaround. So I didn't like that at all. The other part, though, is he's a very talented guy, and I do still think he has very, very good boxing.
Yeah.
But if you mess up somebody's, to your point, natural order of development, it causes all kinds of downstream problems. He was backing up straight. I'm not going to say his head was super high up, but his hand was kind of loose here. And Kai France is just going to feast on a guy like that. That is a technical level error that he should not be making, backing up straight with his hands not in a proper position. It was a hell of a knockout, and because then you go because your momentum is carrying you backwards.
On his foot too, so
yes, which is a common thing.
Yeah,
but I mean, the point being is like look at the optics of it, where you're flying back and then your head rattles when you go back like that. Just a really, really kind of terrible moment. If I were him, you had 2 tough ass fights. These are not bad fighters he lost to. He lost to good fighters. However, it's time for a timeout. I would not touch the octagon the rest of the year.
I agree with you 100%
and probably not till even second quarter of 2025.
Oceania has really kind of taken it on the chin recently. Like this, we were talking.
Well, it was a Kiwi fighter who won. I mean,
true. But I mean, like in terms of, you're just thinking about some of the prospects from the area and the former champions. Izzy, Volk, and Erceg, like guys who were you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because for just a minute, it was just a hot white flame coming off of there. Like everybody seemed like they were winning, and we were spotlighting them so huge.
Although I will say, between ADCC and CJI, Australia and in particular New Zealand had a lot of very, very good competitors. We have that picture.
Okay.
So what's this dude's name? This was the guy that was in Dricus's corner. His name is Etzebeth. Look at the fucking size of this mutant.
That's crazy, man.
Dude, this guy plays fucking rugby.
That's crazy.
Can you imagine him running downhill on you? What the fuck?
You don't want to mess with you don't want to mess with his camp. You know what I mean? Like, look at that. Look at these guys.
Look at the size of his fist. It's like, dude, it's almost as big as Dricus's big ass melon. Is that not? It's like, Long Island Luke, are you not just blown away by the size of this freak?
Yeah, dude, I was marveling at him over the weekend. The dude is a freaking age.
I feel like Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo. That's a huge bitch.
So right? Is this guy legit training with him? Like,
I don't know. So these guys,
or is this just like security detail?
So the national rugby team of South Africa, they're called the Springboks.
Okay.
You might have seen that movie Invincible with Matt Damon.
No, I haven't.
Where
seen
Matt Damon has to play a guy from South Africa. Which it's a fine movie, I guess. They're on a plane. But
up there with the Phantom Menace is like
well, the Phantom Menace is it's just for it's for the stupidest people alive. That's who it's for.
I love it.
Dude, the Phantom Menace is a litmus test. Do you have traumatic brain injury or do you not? That's really the only lesson that you can take from that.
That black and white.
Have you seen that movie?
I have seen it.
It's the worst fucking movie ever made. It's the worst.
Jar Jar saves it, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Jar Jar saves it? I want to fucking drown him with 2
hands.
hands. But the point I'm trying to make here is, I guess the Springboks had beaten what's the Australian team? The Wallabies?
Oh yeah,
I should know this, but
that's the
let's
one
go
that.
with that.
Yeah.
Isn't your fucking dad from that country?
Yeah, but he's a footy guy, not a rugby guy. Come on. We're from
Okay.
Victoria, big footy state. New South Wales is a big rugby state. You know,
I just associate rugby with all the motherfuckers.
Same.
Anyway, put him up one more time, dude. Look at the fucking lunch pail hands on this gigantic human.
ridiculous.
What's his last name? His first name is Etzebeth. What's his last name?
no, his last name is actually Etzebeth. His
Okay.
first name is Eben.
Eden.
Eden.
Eben,
Elizabeth.
E-B-E-N.
Eben. Dude, they got weird ass names in South Africa, don't they? They got those Afrikaan names.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
And who's the other gentleman? He's also got a fist the size of fucking the moon.
I don't know. I could find that out.
He also plays on the Springboks,
Okay.
or he is a Springbok, whatever the hell the
But
proper.
did these, I mean, like, do these guys train MMA? Like, why are they just his buddies? Like,
I mean, if they did, they'd be champions tomorrow.
if you can get down to 265.
Like you're talking about a level of athlete that is
they need a
absurd.
315 division for that one guy.
Yeah, no shit. Dude, I remember MMA when I first started watching. I remember in Icon Sport over in Hawaii, they would have super heavyweight fights
Yeah.
all the time. That used to be a real
Yeah,
division,
yeah.
and then they got rid of it. All right, let's get back to the rundown here very quickly if we can. Let's go to question number 4
Right.
here, Chuck Mindenhall. Dan Hooker, somehow. I mean, if you want to talk about the grittiest performance over the weekend, Dricus had a nice one. I think Dan Hooker had a better one in
Yeah.
terms of the grittiness of it. He turned back the clock and beat a smothering Mateusz Gamrot. Okay, A, how surprising was this? And B, this is probably going to push him at or close to the top 5. What fight makes the most sense? Let's talk about the fight in just a minute.
Okay.
Your reaction to him beating a guy that most of us thought was like not even remotely possible.
I can't even begin to understand his kind of resurrection on this side because he lost those 4 out of 5. And it was, we've seen this kind of thing before with fighters who are pretty good, maybe not great, but very good, put on a show, and then they start losing fights. And you're like, well, this is kind of how they spiral out. Eventually he'll just be out of the UFC. It's like one of those type of things. I admit, I buried him. I was like, I thought he was on that track. You know, you lose this 4 out of 5. There are very good fighters he was losing to. All of them are like huge names, you know, Islam, Poirier, you know, those types of names. But to resurrect was one thing. So kind of win a couple fights. Okay, that's one thing. It was a nice thing. It put him back into a spot like this. But I thought this is where all of any renewed hype goes to die. You fight a guy like Gamrot, he kind of fits the trajectory of the guys who'd already beat Hooker, right? Like once he meets those guys at that level, they usually beat him. So I was kind of, if I had to have picked a lock on this card, I was going to pick Gamrot. I thought that he was that good. I thought his style would overwhelm Hooker, and it just didn't happen, man. And it was kind of shocking. I think the way the fight went down, though, it's almost Poirier-esque against Benoit Saint-Denis in the sense that, you know, it looks like it's going one way, and then it starts to turn. You're like, is Hooker in this fight? You know, you're like kind of wondering, is he going to be able to turn this around? He has that moment in between rounds where he's just like laughing and bleeding and saying, I love this shit, or whatever he's saying. I mean, it's kind of an iconic turn, isn't it? And then he wins the fight. It's funny that in a space of 15 minutes, you can achieve a kind of cult status again, maybe higher than he ever has in the UFC.
I think that's so well stated. And also for me, it's like, dude, remember, he had more than this, but he's had at least 2 fights that were brutal.
Oh, yeah.
So the Dustin Poirier fight was brutal. The Edson Barboza beating, people forget that. You had Daniel Cormier, I believe, commentating that fight, begging the referee on air to stop
I
it.
do remember that, yeah.
Because he was getting crushed. And for him to still be relevant, by the way, not just beating a tough guy, but this whole time he was like, put whoever you want in there. Anybody. I just want to be on this card. These are like a guy who's long in the tooth.
They were trying to kill him off in that sense, right?
The guy who's long in the tooth, who's had some bad beatings. So you kind of feel like, well, we know his level. It's good, but, you know, it's got some limits. And then I'll take a fight on short notice. And then you're fighting a guy who's like the king of smothering, and you fucking win? It's like, oh my God, how is this even possible? I will also say, though,
he didn't have a problem, though, with the decision, like in terms of like, did you think Gamrot won? I know some people thought he did, but
listen, this is a very close fight.
Yeah.
I think you could have had it either way. I kind of leaned a little bit more Gamrot, but I really have zero issue.
That's
I have
the way I
zero
felt.
issue.
Exact same thing.
I have no problem whatsoever at all with the way it was run. And also, like, you know, the judging in there, Ben Cartilage was one of the judges. I think he's one of the best ones in the world, if not the best. And, you know, if you just look at his body of work, it's pretty clear that he's going to value any kind of striking damage or meaningful grappling more than just control time. But it also kind of gets to another part of the story, Chuck, which is Mateusz Gamrot has had a lot of these kinds of fights where he got beat up more in this one, although his hands look pretty good too, I thought.
Yeah, he did.
But he's had a lot of these ones where he like kind of eked it out or was just a little bit ahead because he's a very, very dynamic wrestler. But, you know, I'm not going to say he got his comeuppance. That's not the right word. But he might have been due for one. And I want to point out something too. Hooker going for those guillotine chokes, forcing him to go back down. He didn't out-wrestle Gamrot, but he definitely out-techniqued him.
Right.
He definitely had a better answer that speaks to the judges, that forces a reaction. Like, I mean, the judging was close, or the scoring was going to be close, but Gamrot has been kind of playing with fire. Finally, you got a guy who doesn't give a fuck at all and is clever. He had clever answers. This is not the first time we've ever seen them in MMA, but as applied to Gamrot, and he didn't really have an answer for it.
So weird, man, because Gamrot, if you'd said, and I mean, and most predicted that, you know, he was going to win this fight. He was a huge betting favorite. But if you'd seen it, if you'd seen the first round and you see Gamrot get up on the scorecards essentially, you'd be like, this is going to just follow a pattern almost, you know, because he's that kind of fighter. You know, he may not finish you, but he's just going to do the same thing. He's just going to eke out the rounds like you're mentioning. He'll be 30-27. It's kind of crazy that he wasn't able to do that. Like, he was just prevented from doing that. Plus, that crowd was nuts, man. Like, it looked very strange. It looked smaller, like that arena, but when he was fighting, every single time Hooker would throw, it was just like cacophony. It was like, boom. They was just, you know, loud, and I was like, this is nuts, man. So it must have been like a little bit of a Hitchcockian vertigo moment for Gamrot, because I think it started going south and he didn't know what to do with it. Like, he just kind of tried to persevere. He probably thought he had it, but in the end, man, it's just, that's how it goes, right? Like, a close fight, it goes either way.
All right, so who does he fight next? There have been a couple of names suggested. The big one was Charles Oliveira. You could do Dan Hooker versus Charles Oliveira. I'll say this. He had kind of indicated in an interview with Oscar Willis from the Mac Life that there's going to be a Sydney card in February. So potentially he'll be back on there. So you have to ask yourself, who is willing to travel to Sydney to fight Dan Hooker? I don't know the answer to that.
It would have to be somebody under him then, I would think, in the rankings.
Maybe. It would depend. But I'll tell you what. You could do – this is the interesting part. He had kind of faded outside of the top, I think certainly top 5. Where's he ranked right now? So Dan Hooker currently sits, as it stands this moment, Dan Hooker is sitting at number 11. So he's fallen outside the top 10.
As of tomorrow, though, they'll update that. I think, because
this is the number as of still Friday, essentially. But he's going to be back either at 5 or pretty close to it. Well, now you're around the Chandlers and you're around the Poiriers.
Right.
So you could do Poirier again. You could do Oliveira. Here's my vote. Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje.
I saw you say this.
Yeah, where are you on this?
I love that fight because I think Justin Gaethje's at a part in his career that's sort of the same way. Like, so that, I mean, obviously, like, you're looking at two guys who think differently, like, right? Just put them in front of me, let's go. I think they would accommodate each other 100%, like Gaethje does with everybody. And I think that's a great Hooker fight, like, too. Like, I think that it would make a lot of sense. He seems so open to it. I'm like, I was thinking about this, man. I was like, he really does fit the bill of like the BMF, like whatever that is, right? Like, you're like the BMF when you talk about that, he kind of fits the bill because he's just put me in there I'll go to war, get me bleeding, get my hair pink, you know, with his new hair. It's like any of this stuff. Like, I feel like he's that guy. So they could plug him into a situation like that. I'd be fine with it. But he mentioned, and I was like, everybody always mentions Conor McGregor, but I'm like, if let's say that he like either he fights Michael Chandler, because Michael Chandler's kind of left on this endless loop of waiting for McGregor. That could work. But if he was going to somehow get that McGregor fight, I could see why this would be an appealing fight for Conor McGregor. You know, it's a guy who will stand and trade with him and maybe play to his strengths a little bit more than like maybe Chandler, maybe. But I'm like, I feel like Dan Hooker's kind of got it. He's in that weird space now because he put on such an iconic performance here that all of them sound good, right? I think I would go with Gaethje ultimately. If I was choosing, I'd probably go with Gaethje. I just think that that's like can't miss fight. Like, that'd be a can't miss action fight.
There's no wrong answer.
That's true.
It's just a function of what the UFC wants to do with those guys on what dates for what purpose. But you literally cannot go wrong with any of them.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen a little bit of this year, like guys. You were mentioning oh, this was before we were taping, but we were talking about like, you know, what are you going to do with Izzy next? And you're like, well, do you put him in like against a guy like Bo Nickel? Like make him like the guy who, you know, becomes like the stepping, you know, you're a stepping stone for this other guy to get up there. I feel like they've tried to do this, like Benoit Saint Denis with Dustin Poirier. They're kind of a little bit maybe with this Gamrot, like, well, let's give him a guy here he can get through, and then we'll talk about the more serious fight, you know. And it keeps backfiring, man. It's unusual, isn't it? Like it's unusual that these veterans are sort of like, nope, I'm drawing the line in the sand, and they're winning these fights. So we've seen it a few times this year. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, so I feel like it's he's kind of in a great spot for that. I think once you go through the moment they're trying to kind of like feed you to somebody, and you beat that guy, it puts you in a great spot. So if I heard that, I think somebody had mentioned that Dana was looking at Charles Oliveira. If that's the case, you're kind of giving him an upward trajectory, even if he's at 5 or 6. You're still fighting a guy now who's what, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So if he wants that, if he's interested in that, that's a great fight.
If he beats Charles Oliveira, how far are you away from a title shot?
You would have to be right there, right? Which is just, that would be mind-blowing.
Unthinkable on Friday. Unthinkable that Dan Hooker would ever be in a position like that.
After he lost 4 out of 5, if you said, hey, if he's 4 fights away from a title shot, he's just going to win all these fights, that would be ridiculous. Nobody would believe that. That would be impossible.
And yet, here we are.
I know.
He spoke to Daniel Cormier after the fight, and he is jazzed up about what he wants next. This is what he said.
Dan, you're going to be in the top 5. That was a big victory. What do you want next?
Look at me now. I want to move, brother. I want the BMF. I want Conor McGregor. I want a title eliminator. I want everything, brother. I want it all, Sean. I want it all, Hunter.
What a phenomenal performance. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the Hangman, Dan Hooker.
That's as high as you can be on drugs without being high on drugs. You know what I mean?
100%.
Your brain chemistry is just being tsunamied by adrenaline, and that's what you're seeing right there.
But dude, I don't know how he keeps that going. Like his whole face is swollen, his eyes are swollen shut. You know, he's bleeding, and I mean, he was even doing that between the rounds. It's crazy, man. If ever there's a guy, like there are certain guys in the sport who communicate the high of cage fighting or just fighting in general in a way that others can't. That's what happened.
Speaking of which, this is him between rounds. That moment he was like,
okay.
I love this shit,
this is
brother.
great. This is great.
I love this. Let's go.
That's wild.
I mean, if he doesn't go into sports, that's a guy. Like, I'm not saying he is a bad guy. I'm saying if he wanted to be a serial killer, he's got some of the makeup for it. You know what I mean?
Man. You imagine getting into like a bar scrap sometimes, and you see some sadistic son of a bitch like who's smiling after you hit him with everything you have. I would be like, why? Well, out of all the guys you could fight, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there are some people who just love it. They just love it.
Tells you how hard Michael Chandler hit him because it kind of folded him in that way. And that like normally even Edson Barboza had to kind of beat him accumulatively. You know what I mean? Poirier too. Poirier had to beat him up accumulatively.
It's crazy with these guys too, man. Like you mentioned Barboza. I think that sometimes you look at these, like Barboza's been in a ton of wars, you know, like,
and he just beat Sadiq Youssef. You can't even believe it.
I know. And it's like you see these guys and there's so many wars. And we've talked about the old welterweight division where the buzzsaw that was Robbie Lawler and how they were just altering each other's lives. So every time somebody fought, you know, Johnny Hendricks would get up there, whoever it is, and they would just come out in a different form. Rory McDonald was never the same, you know, after these things. But I feel like some of these guys, like in this lightweight division, are like this. They're just beating each other to pulps and loving it and doing it again and again. It's just crazy, man. I don't think we've ever seen this level of destruction within the division.
I don't. On the one hand, I am quite worried about his long-term health. On the other hand, it's like very few guys embody Warhorse better than Dan Hooker.
Yeah.
You know, that's pretty remarkable. All right, last but not least for topic number 5 here, Chuck Mindenhall, let's talk about Tai Tuivasa. Not a great look. He loses his 5th straight fight in the UFC. Not fighting bums, but 5 straight's bad. And it was a lackluster decision to Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, there was controversy with the judging. We'll put that aside for just a second. Let me ask it this way. After 5 consecutive losses, he's at 31 years of age. Is there any fix for what ails Tai Tuivasa?
You know, man, you tell me too, because in a weird way, he reminds me of Mark Hunt when the UFC inherited Mark Hunt, you know, from the transaction. he was on a losing streak, and he was kind of like a guy that you're like probably wouldn't be on the roster, but he kind of had a little bit of a cult following. Like people like people were behind him, and he started to win, which is kind of crazy. Can Tuivasa do that? Yes, because he's in a division where his power, if he's able to land it, will translate. But the problem is, and I think you could look at all 5 of his losses. I went back and looked at a couple of them. I mean, he's consistently outstruck most of the time, like double strikes, like where he's taking way more and he's doing it all so he can land something. It's exciting because you're like, well, this guy, he's like, but you're doing the thing. Like I remember Dan Henderson saying, I don't want to be known for my chin. That means I'm getting beat up all the time. When people would talk about how the strength of his chin, it's almost like you're saying, well, this guy's a warrior, man. He's a warrior. He gets in there, he swings, and we're just waiting for him to land the punch that'll knock the guy out. But he's getting out skilled in these fights. Like these guys are, they're lighting him up. Rozenstruik was just outstriking him straight up, and just I don't know he's going to win a lot of fights. I appreciate that he's the shoeies and all the things, but I'm not sure he's going to match up with the very best guys in the division. And even I realize there's probably a little bit of a smoke and mirrors effect because he won 5 or 6 in a row before his streak the other way, and there's probably some smoke and mirrors to that, like where he was getting a little lucky with some of the shots he landed and things like that, and persevering more than the other guy. So I don't know what you do with him. I think that in that division he could certainly give him another UFC fight, but I don't think that he's going to be able to turn around where he's at. I think he's a guy who he's trying really hard to land that big shot that'll end it and be like, and kind of have the celebration, but he's not getting that easily. The guys are like Pavlovich, the guys he's facing, they know what he can do and they can piece him apart, and that's the unfortunate part of this, I
mean, I go back to some of the, I'm not, obviously Izzy is a massively decorated champion, but like one of the things that I do think is a weakness of his is like there's not a lot of offense on the ground. Yeah. Here's a case where if you had a reasonably well-rounded heavyweight, they could have taken Rozenstruik down and pounded him out. Like that's not something that he's not unaccustomed to facing. That he's 36 years old. Like I know Overeem kind of botched that, but he was having great success at it for the most part in that fight. Anyway, and so it's like
till the very end, right?
Till the very end. Yeah, that was the fight that was in DC.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is like, could he take him down and have his way for long stretches? Yes, of course. And this was only a 3-round fight. That was a 5-round main event. Right. So all you have to do is bag a couple of these rounds, and and then you can could he stand with Rozenstruik? Yeah, he could stand with him, but he was getting picked apart. I mean, this is the thing I go back to. If you learn how to fight in your formative years without correction very early, especially at heavyweight. As a bruiser, that is a very difficult thing to fix.
Yeah.
Very difficult thing to fix because then you get thrust to the deep end and you're better than the guys you already beat, but you're not nearly good enough to beat the other guys, basically.
Right.
And so you're in this in-between space where you can't really do a lot. You don't have a second gear to wrestle or whatever. Going back to Dricus, like that changes a lot about his ability to fight on the ground. And then more to the point, like I actually feel like if you're trying to fix what Tai is up against, it wouldn't have been helpful in this fight because Rozenstruik was just kind of facing off with him. But like, look at Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis didn't really change his striking much. What did he add to his game? The ability to get up. That was a big portion of what he did. The ability to get up, everyone wanted to wrestle him.
Right.
But they didn't really change him as a striker too much. I felt like we have put the tweet up if you can, Long Island Luke, where we have. There he is, Tai Tuivasa saying, F, what a sport. I put my all into this camp and didn't come away with the win. Big love to all my fans and blah, blah, blah. He goes on from there. My bad. Love you all, the real ones. Live to fight another day. Aussie fan, excuse me. I love you. Cunts. Best in the bizzo. Seems to be taking it as well as one can.
Yeah.
My point I'm trying to make here is...
He's got a lot of experience with it.
Trying to turn that guy into somebody who jabs and sets off at an angle and is faking and feinting, you have to give him some of those tools. But if they learn how to fight a certain way as a heavyweight and a big heavyweight, the die is cast. The die is cast. Add tools around it. Trying to reform it and retrofit it, it's a little too late, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think he's interested, to be honest. Like
you didn't think he was trying to fight in a more cerebral way? I thought he was trying to.
I mean, maybe, but like I look at I was trying to think of an example. Maybe like an Arlovsky, right, who like suffered a bunch of knockouts when he was still kind of throwing caution into the wind more in the divisions, but then he just turns himself into a boring version of himself. I don't know. And there's just certain guys. I don't think that they could accept it. Maybe if he was going to do it, it'd be like, okay, maybe for a single fight. But I don't think it's in his personality, right? To just try to add stuff that's more technical and to like piece apart. You know what I mean? I don't think that's his personality. So I don't know. Like that's really it sometimes comes down to that. Arlovsky was able to do it to an extent, and like.
But he was never a crazy brawler either.
True.
He was he was a Sambo European champion.
That's true. And I mean, you're looking more like I guess he wound up in some brawlish type things, and he came out on the losing end. So he kind of somehow like let's keep it holstered more and like
and Overeem learned how to be an outside fighter as well. It can happen.
Yeah.
But both of those guys were not big, fat, heavy. I mean, I'm not trying to shame them, but big carriage, heavyweight
different
brawlers.
Guys. It's closer to like a Mark Hunt, right? Like
yes.
it's that sort of
but
situation.
Mark Hunt was a world champion kickboxer before he ever got to MMA.
That is true.
So like it's just and listen, some guys are going to have more natural aptitude than others. But I'm just saying, if you've got a big heavyweight who's not quick but powerful, durable, and they learn how to just basically fight with that as their constitution, they're going to hit a ceiling, and when they do, fixing the problem will be much harder later than it will be earlier.
Would you give him another fight in the UFC?
Probably one more.
And who would you like? What would be the ideal fight for him at this stage? Like 5 in a row,
some donk, just a donk.
That's what I think too.
Unranked, but well outside the top 15.
I think so too. And it's weird, man. Like he's got one of those strange trajectories. We see this occasionally in the heavyweight division. 5-6 wins in a row, 3 losses in a row. 6 wins in a row, 5 losses in a row. Occasionally they have these streaks. That's where the Arlovsky really comes in because he's had those types of streaks all through his career. It's very strange. I'm not saying he can't win fights, but he would be doing it based on just the way he's been doing it. He would just be now winning the way he wants to fight. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. I think too many people know what he wants to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is anymore. But I hope that, again, I think that there are things they could add to his game. A couple of things they could sharpen up. But like, we're going to be the guy who jabs and does the peekaboo style. Like,
you can't imagine him.
It's not in the cards.
I mean, he's throws caution to the wind even when he's drinking beer out of shoes. Who's going to drink a beer out of somebody's used shoe? I mean,
yeah, a dirty piece of shit like me and Brian Campbell. The thing, let's talk about the scoring on that fight very quickly if we can. A 30-27.
That was the big story in this.
Put up the scorecard here. So Howie Booth, which by the way just sounds like a name that AI came up with, right? You got 10-9 all the way through. Now there was a 10-9 for Tui in the first round from Charlie Keach. I don't quite get that either.
No.
I thought it was a clean sweep. David Lethaby or Lethaby, however you say his name, he is the one that's got the best one by far. So they replace him. Judge Howie Booth, who gave all 3 rounds to Tai Tuivasa, is the out judge in 14.47 of his scored rounds in UFC events dating back to 2017. That's out of 76 rounds. Highest dissent percentage of any judge with 75 or more UFC rounds scored. The guy probably...
My boy Douglas Crosby. I mean, even...
Yeah, Douglas Crosby does a bit. Like he thinks he's painting like a painting. You know what I mean? Like this sort of like, I'm on this grand mission of fight knowing.
Don't I know it? I'm the one who wrote the piece about it.
And this is my canvas, right? I think Howie Booth is just a fucking donk. Did you like that the commission replaced him right away in the middle of the event?
Yes, I did. But do you recall it was either Macau, Singapore? It was one of those where they did this before. Like they have
done it before, yes.
Yeah, and it's like I don't mind it at all, man. If you get something that far off, something's wrong there, man. I just don't know. We have seen dueling 30-27s before. Like it's usually in a closer fight where they it's a couple close rounds, 30-27 one way, 30-27 another. Like we've seen that. It always seems really weird that can happen, but there is no doubt this was a 30-27, at worst a 29-28, but I think it's 100% 30-27, the one way. How you came up with 3 rounds. Like, look at the stats, too. Like, control time, everything goes, it goes to Rozenstruik. It's a crazy thing. So that tells me that there was some, like, crazy blinders bias going on. I just don't know how you get to that card.
I think not only is it good that they replaced him, I think in a world where betting is now a central product in sports generally, and fight sports in particular, and you see a scorecard like that, you have an obligation to remove him. You have an obligation.
He is New Zealand. He's a New Zealander, right? The Howie Booth, or
I mean, the relevant commission is the whatever New South Wales or whatever the relevant commission is for that.
Western Australia.
Western Australia, excuse me. It's the Western Australian commission. So they're the ones that ultimately made the call, and I think it was very much the right call. I don't know about the nationality of the.
I think he is.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's not here. But if he did have a bias, who knows?
I mean, the good news is, in the end, the right guy won.
Yes.
And they removed him. But that is, it's so funny to me that sometimes people will be like, "Oh, boxing had this terrible decision. That's why I watch UFC." And I'm like, bitch, I know you don't watch UFC. I know you don't watch UFC.
Without saying.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I can't take these bad decisions anymore. That's why I watch UFC. And I'm like, motherfucker, it's the same people in charge of all of it. It's
even more glaring because you're only dealing with 3 to 5 rounds. I mean, it's more glaring when there's a horrible scorecard than in boxing where you can kind of hide in the middle rounds. You got some weird score. It's just, it makes no sense. I think this level of scrutiny when you see something like this is bigger too, because it's just, you're watching a 15-minute fight. There's only 3 installments of that fight. It's pretty easy to judge in one way. In a fight like that, it's pretty easy to judge. So when you see something like that, you're like, whoa, that's a major red flag.
I mean, I had pornography on my phone and I was still managing to score the fight accurately.
No doubt.
All right, with that in mind, those are our top 5 topics. Let's get to what the fans have in store for us.
Right.
Let's do DMs from the Diggity Donks. Oh my God, I hate this fucking intro. It's like, hey guys, we need to come up with an element. Can you get a donkey ejaculating as our sound? Can you do that? Turns out you can. All right. Question number 1. Let's fire it up here as I left my glasses at home. From the Gibsonator, this will go to you first, Chuck Mindenhall. Should the next fight for Dan Hooker be a BM? That's a great question. We didn't even get to this.
Wow.
Should it be a BMF fight against Max, win or lose against Ilya? So let's reference. Let's posit he loses to Ilya. It's not some brutal destruction. Okay. He can kind of make a reasonable turnaround. Would that make sense for you?
I think so, because where would Max be at that point? And I'm like, if Max is I don't think the BMF title is on the line for this fight with Ilya, right? I don't even know how they're doing this. I know that
I don't believe that they have said it is.
Okay. Well, whatever the case is, I think Max doesn't have an obvious next move, and he kind of enters that weird space where you're like, maybe he's not all about titles anymore after you've lost this other fight. He's already kind of been there, done that. I wouldn't mind seeing it. I mean, it's that's a fun fight to me. After watching what Holloway did with Gaethje in the other Colt-making fight of the year, even though the Colt of Max was already strong, I just think this solidified his thing when he's like, let's do this right here, knocks him out with seconds to go. I think that they kind of have parallels in that way. They kind of have this strange, there's something transcendent about that attitude that would match in the BMF sort of thing. And if you're trying to really create an idea of what the BMF is, not just throwing guys in there who are like, oh, he doesn't care, he's a reprobate or whatever, or he's nuts. This would actually make sense to me. It's like you got 2 guys who they really are kind of the baddest motherfuckers, aren't they? I think that would be fun.
I don't need to see Hooker in a BMF fight. For me, it feels a little.
Do you even like the BMF concept at all? I feel like it's some people like it. And some are...
I would say this, obviously by itself. If you watch combat sports long enough, and this is obvious to people right away, but sometimes it's not. What you really realize over time is the title does not make the fighter makes the title. And I feel like after what Max did to Justin, he made that title matter a little bit.
Right.
So I do think it matters a little bit. But I don't view it as a trinket, but I don't view it as a weight class title. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's valuable in some kind of capacity.
Okay.
By the way, I just want to bring this up because it just blows my fucking mind about this. PFL, this is not neither here nor there. I'm seeing this now. Jake Paul, Francis Ngannou, Chris Cyborg, and then Henry Ferreira and Larissa Pacheco. They're going to be in D.C., my hometown, on Thursday. They're doing a press conference. Dude, they're not letting people have, or at a bare minimum, they're not letting me, but I'm told no one's getting one-on-ones.
What?
And I'm like, guys, put the camera on me, please. I'm trying to be nice to the PFL here. PFL, fire the dumb motherfucker who's making the call that they can't do one-on-ones. Because let me just break this down for everyone very quickly. It is not worth my time. I have another interview scheduled during that time with Dr. Mike Israetel. Anybody who knows anything about him, I have to cancel that to go to this, which I'll do if I can get one-on-ones. If I can't, understand something. There's not enough juice through these scrums for me to make my money back going and doing that. This is obvious to anybody who understands how media works. Please give me a reason to go to this press conference. I am fucking begging you. Okay.
Well said. Well said.
I mean, dude,
that's the most ridiculous thing.
Who is the moron? Who is the moron who is telling them we don't need to do one-on-one? You're promoting the biggest fight you've ever had, and local media can't have one-on-one. By the way, I don't mean like hour-long sit-downs. I mean 5 to 10 minutes.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah, like you
10
normally,
minutes.
yes.
Dude, you know who does one-on-ones? Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah.
You know who does one-on-ones? Tank Davis. You know who does one-on-ones? Conor McGregor. Izzy. What are you doing?
Not Larissa Pacheco.
Listen, I actually bet that she would. And I bet Chris Cyborg would too. It is unfucking fathomable
crazy,
to me
man.
that you're having a press conference and you're only going to allow scrums. It is such a stupid decision. It's a stupid
have they
decision.
Told you why?
Huh?
Have they told you why? Like, have they?
I have tried to. There's
yeah.
people in PR who are trying to advocate. Like
Right.
I've the people.
It is.
Let me be
silly.
clear. The people I've talked to in PR are trying to get something to happen. So like,
Okay.
I really thank you to all of them. I really appreciate it. It's somebody above them.
Oh my god.
Somebody in leadership was like, we're not doing those. A fucking moron is making that call. Just so you know. Okay.
I
all
just
right.
want to say thank you to PFL for like doing this right
I
now
just-
on your
I-
computer
I
to
like-
get you in there.
it's
This
like-
is what I want. This is the Luke Thomas I come for.
It's like, dude, how fucking stupid do you have to be to think that that's a good idea?
every now and again we just tap into the Luke Thomas is pissed.
Oh my god,
segment.
dude, am I crazy? Please tell these people I'm not crazy.
No, dude, you're 100% right, and they're trying to compete obviously with the UFC, and this is their biggest event. They 100%.
They should be
have
telling
access.
media in attendance,
Yeah.
we will get you one-on-ones.
Exactly.
When can we schedule your one-on-one?
Yeah.
Fuck
Well, dude, we've been in this
me.
game a long time, and it's very rare that you're shut down on things like this, especially from companies that like they're hailing this. What are they calling it? They have a title for it, like the
Battle of the Giants or something?
Battle
Yeah.
of the Giants. Okay, you're putting this on as the card of the year.
Yeah.
You better make it accessible.
This is your
you know?
biggest signing. Jake Paul's going to be there. He's also
Yeah.
like a big signing / ambassador.
Right.
You finally got, by the way, Larissa Pacheco, people sleeping on this. She might beat Cyborg. That's a great fight.
Huge
Like,
for her.
This is your best card. How the fuck are you promoting
I
it
don't know.
this poorly?
I don't
How
know,
the
man.
fuck is that possible?
You know, I do the rankings, pound for pound rankings, and Larissa Pacheco's been at number 10 for a while. And I was writing, you write up the little blurbs about why it's important. And I was saying, like, there's nobody who could lay claim to saying that I beat Kayla Harrison and Cyborg, right? These bigger women who've kind of been dominant.
Yes.
And she can lay claim to that. I think they gotta actually
she might go in there and start Dricusing them. You know what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying, man.
The
So
person nobody saw coming.
They might want to get behind that a little bit and promote it.
Oh my god, dude!
Yeah.
I cannot believe these people. Okay, have fun at the presser. I won't be at, I guess. All
You're
right,
gonna
next
miss out on a
question.
hell of a scrum.
Yeah, it must be. I bet it's gonna be an awesome scrum. It's not cage fighting. Is Alex Pereira the most protected champion of all time? Okay, so let's talk about UFC 307 here a little
the
bit.
elephant in
UFC
the room.
307. Okay, they announce it. What's the date for that? Can you look that up for me, Long Island Luke, very quickly?
It's a Salt Lake City card.
Salt Lake City.
October something, right?
I think it's. Are they going to have 2 pay-per-views in the month of
Yeah, they
October?
do.
Because the 28th is going to be the one, or 26th, I believe.
October 5th.
That's what I
So they're going
thought,
to have 2 pay-per-views that month. Now, granted, the second of those is really interesting between Max and, well, honestly, Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria is the best fight that can be made in MMA, arguably.
You've been saying that.
Well,
That's
it
a good
was Volk, and
Yeah.
then he dusted him
Yeah.
off, and now it moves over to Max,
I love
and
it,
Max resurrected everything with this crazy
Yeah.
win over. Okay, so that's the best fight. I sort of get it, right, Chuck? You need headliners. The second fight on this card is Raquel Pennington taking on Juliana Pena.
Yeah.
Everyone's wondering why she's getting a title shot while Kayla Harrison just like
Caitlin Vieira.
smashed someone at UFC 300. She's going to take on Ketlin Vieira. I don't dislike that fight.
Sure.
I don't. And I get that you're trying with Juliana Pena. She's going to talk a lot. So she's going to sell a fight, which Raquel Pennington is just not going to
Right.
do that. Fine. But talking about the main event, I don't hate this fight. I don't hate the fight between Alex Pereira and Khalil Roundtree. It's going to be fun. For as long as it lasts, it'll be action-packed. And hey, you never know. It could actually end up being an upset. Like, it's possible.
Yep.
But later that month, the prohibitive #1 guy is fighting Alexander Rakic, which is also a fine fight.
It's fairly glaring.
But for reasons we don't know or understand, what the fuck is they doing here, Chuck?
I don't know. This is, I mean, I've seen a lot of people talking about this too. I mean, I feel a little bit for Ankalaev because he was cast into the title fight. Was it a draw? I forget now. Like, how did that work out? But I know that Dana
it was a
hated
draw.
It was
Jan.
a draw, right? Like, so it was like one of those things where Dana clearly did not love the fight, and I feel like ever since then, the poor Ankalaev is just kind of like he's behind an eternal 8 ball. But I also think that in relation to this question, that this has certainly crossed some people's minds, right? Like, I don't think that you want to be in the business. And I'm like, I know that they say all the time, like, our job is to beat the champion. We're trying to find the guy who will beat the champion or the woman who's going to beat the champion. I don't think they want to be in the Ankalaev business as that champion right now. So if you go put him into a fight with Pereira, like, and I think we'd see the stylistic matchups. And I think a lot of people would probably be like, this is a nightmare matchup for Alex Pereira. You know what I mean? Like, if you put that fight together, you might actually be in the Ankalaev business. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of...
So, I mean, okay, I'm just going to ask the question. Are you saying that Alex Pereira is protected?
I'm saying that, like, it looks glaring that it's not Ankalaev. And so I guess in a roundabout way, I'm like, it seems like he's being a little protected in this situation. I don't think that they're necessarily, you know, this could be more a reward in a weird way to, like, we're going to give you a favorable matchup because you've stepped in for UFC 300, you stepped in for UFC 303, you saved these events. We barely, you know, 303, we didn't even feel the loss of Conor McGregor in the end because you had a guy like Pereira stepping up and he's become this guy. This could be a little bit of like a, hey, thank you fight, you know, but it does feel a little bit because I just think that Ankalaev was a clear-cut choice, right? Like, why would he not be able to do it? Unless he's not able to do this for some reason that I have no idea why. I have no idea why he's not actually the guy fighting for that title.
This is one of the reasons why I think Izzy at 205. I know he's, I guess, saying he wants to stay at 185. This is why at 205, I think it's wide open. It's like, dude, they're granting title shots. And again, I'm not even necessarily mad at it on just a fight basis, but they're granting title shots to the number 8 ranked guy. Izzy can't get a title shot with one win over a top 7 guy. Yeah, fuck, of course he could.
I mean, Alex Pereira did.
Right.
You know?
Like,
he went up, he lost, and went up, and now
205 is wide open, wide open. Kind of a crazy moment. Also, what chance do you give Pennington to beat Pena?
Oh, man.
Because I think what the UFC is hoping is that they get, remember, Pena had a beef. Folks don't remember this. Pena had a beef with Ronda Rousey from the show. Big time beef. They were kind of like maybe going to fight, and then it just kind of fizzled. And she fought Amanda Nunes. They would love as champion, Juliana Pena fights Kayla Harrison. Harrison goes in there and bludgeons her, and then, you know,
that's got it all mapped out. But I mean, honestly, that's how I see it. I don't give. I mean, Rocky's weird, dude. And I was thinking about this, like, Pennington's in a situation. Imagine being Pennington, right? You're the one everybody's circling. I need to beat her, right? She's got the belt. You're going into this card where there's 2 women. It's like a twofold thing. It's almost like Sean O'Malley having to, like, your job is to go through not only Merab Dvalishvili, but also Umar Nurmagomedov waits for you. Like, this is crazy. That's a very daunting way to look at it. In the same situation, like, Rocky has been asked to go in there and beat Pena, and then hopefully, like, if she's able to do that, Harrison is right there, and that's who you have to face next. That's a crazy thing to ask people, even if it's Pena's side, and you're like, you need to go through Rocky and then her. It's just crazy, right? Like, it's a nutty thing. I think that her perseverance, Rocky's, has been remarkable in terms of winning whatever it is, 6 fights in a row and kind of showing up at the end. But
dude,
I also
remember she quit or wanted to quit against Nunes, and their coach sent her out and then she got finished. A lot of fighters don't recover from something like that.
True, that's true. So it's been, I think her perseverance, like, just what she's been able to do is actually really unsung. But I do kind of think that this is where it ends. I think that Pena wins this
Here's the
fight.
card very quickly. Again, this will be at the Delta Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. Utah, very beautiful country.
It is. It's nice.
When I say country, I mean like space. I don't mean.
Yeah, it's like the other side of the Rockies from Denver, where I grew up. It's
That's
nice,
right.
Yeah.
You got Powhatan and Khalil Roundtree. Then you got Pennington and Pena. You got Wonder Boy versus Joaquin Buckley.
Yeah,
love that fight. Jose Aldo against Mario Bautista. Fun contest.
Yeah, that's good.
Roman Dolidze, Kevin Holland, fine. I don't have a.
Yeah,
it's cool. I don't hate it. I don't love it, but it's cool. The big one, Aljamain Sterling taking on Movsar Evloev. That is huge, huge fight. And then Ketlin Vieira taking on Kayla Harrison. I'm sure they'll add some more fights.
That's a pretty deep card.
Yeah, it's a very deep card. And by the way, her retirement bout, Carla Esparza versus Tisha Pennington. Cesar Almeida taking on Ihor Potieria, the weirdest motherfucker on earth. And then Marina Rodriguez taking on...
Dude, all these women fights on there, huh?
At altitude, you can't put the heavyweights.
Yeah, that's true.
Can't put them
You don't want to do that
Dude,
again.
I remember when I was at the Pepsi Center, I was backstage after Ben Rothwell fought Mark Hunt.
I was there for that, too.
Them two was huffing air, boy. They were huffing
It's
air.
bad out there, man.
Dude, I'll tell you what, when I was on vacation, so Denver's at like 5,000 feet elevation.
Yep.
Mexico City is about like 7,300. 74 maybe, 74. Bogota, where I was, is another 1,000 above that.
Holy hell.
So they have this thing what they call altitude sickness.
Your nose bleeding the whole time? Like,
no, I didn't have a nosebleed, but I had a horrible headache. It's
bad sometimes.
So I have to. So you can actually go to the store. I mean, you can't get high from it, but you can buy coca leaf tea.
Okay.
So I had to go right to the store and get that shit because the altitude was like no fucking joke.
Every time I go to Denver now, I grew up there, and to be
feel
fair, yeah, I still go out there quite a bit, and we go fishing a lot of times. Like when I'm there, I love to do this, and it's always at 8,000, 9,000 feet. I have to hydrate really.
Oh yeah.
Like the night before, man, I can't do it anymore.
That's right. You have to have a ton of
crazy,
liquid in your system. All right, next.
Wait, real quick. What are your 8 top Esparza moments in the UFC? Like.
All right, next from Christina Pinto _BJJ. Did you watch CJI? By the way, everybody and their brother writing CGI.
I know.
CJI and or ADCC this weekend. I watched mostly CJI, but I watched some ADCC. Thoughts on the events and what this means for the BJJ competition world. Chuck, did you watch any of this?
So I honestly, like guys like you who were kind of talking about it, I was following on social media. I didn't actually get a chance to watch.
Okay.
But I know that you did, so this is a good question for you.
Okay, so this, I really don't think people understand how big the weekend was. I do not want to sit here and say that the sport has changed forever. That might be a little bit too big. And I have a number of different takeaways. By the way, I do think that the CJI folks made one big error. I was looking on YouTube trending for all the videos, and there were ADCC videos that were on there. Michael Pixley, you don't know who he is, over at ADCC. He's a former D2 national champ, and he's a purple belt now. I think he Uchima'd Nicholas Miragali, who was widely expected to be double gold in absolute and whatever, and then darsed him and finished him off. That was a huge upset. The highlight of that video from ADCC trended. So then I went to the B Team YouTube channel, which is where all their videos ended. They didn't pull out any individual matches. Man. So they lost an opportunity, in my judgment, to trend. But okay, small thing. We had all thought that what CJI was really about was ADCC is not paying their guys. CJI will. This is a new way for the jiu-jitsu athletes to be paid. Isn't that great? And I don't want to undermine that. That is a real huge part of it. In fact, part of the reason why they had the talent roster that they did was because they had such an attractive prize at the end. But that is not the story of the weekend. Dude, CJI did not feel like a competitor to ADCC to me.
Okay.
It felt like the next evolution of it.
I can dig that.
It felt like ADCC was living in the past. And do they do some things better than CJI? Yes. Yes, they do. Does CJI have some room for improvement? Absolutely. But CJI, to me, felt like this is a better way to do jiu-jitsu, irrespective of the money and how it is apportioned, which, of course, is a central component to their identity. I have not been a believer, or at least I was very skeptical of this idea that the wall from Karate Combat could be repurposed. Dude, it
makes
is
sense.
a revelation. It is a revelation. ADCC, if you watch one of the big matches that they had was between Gordon Ryan and Felipe Pena, who's a big-time rival of his. and there were constant restarts, constant pauses in the action. And the referee is very involved in awarding points in certain parts, and then not so much in this one, but in other jiu-jitsu tournaments, advantages and shit like that, where they have a very active role. The referee here in CJI played almost no role. The wall facilitates the continuation of action. Now, there were some inconsistent judging issues because they basically did 3 5-minute rounds and then 5 minutes for the finals. And the judges, and there would be open scoring as well. By the way, open scoring worked very well with CJI. I still am skeptical about MMA, but it worked very well for this.
Okay.
So this is what I come back to. It's like, dude, they didn't have a different. I thought when Craig was talking about all the money that was really the core of the issue.
Right.
Craig Jones is a guy I'll never forget, man. Years ago, or whenever he put it out. I mean, I think it's a couple years old at this point. I've watched almost all of his instructionals.
Yeah.
And one thing you take away from it, like one thread, the through line through all of them, is that this is a guy who looks at the world very differently and has very different ideas. The money was just an idea to really make ADCC look bad. Like, they spent all this money on shit that, like, did their production look nice? It looked nice, Chuck. I'm telling you, it looked nice. It looked nice. But ultimately, it wasn't serving the viewer all that much. It was, ADCC was trying to be like, we're the big brother. And what they ended up actually showing was that they were the older brother, and like old brother. This was, to me, so profoundly beyond what I ever thought possible. Dude, you have people talking about CJI being the best jiu-jitsu tournament they've ever seen.
Right.
And I'm not joking when I say this, guys. If you didn't see Cade Ruotolo versus Andrew Tackett, it might be the best no-gi grappling match I've ever seen. And the rules and the surface facilitated all of this.
I love to hear this because back in the day, you remember Metamoris?
Yes.
I covered a couple of those, and it was almost like they were trying to do this. They were almost trying to figure out a hipster way to kind of bring an audience in, give it cool lighting, give it cool vibe. But everything ended in a draw, and I feel like that is like an American audience that's a hard sell, right? Like when everything's a draw. Plus, they were falling off. You know what I mean? Like the structure that they had. So I fully get it. Like I remember going to a couple. I tried to give it. You try to give it as many chances as you can and do the writing, but it stalled too much. Like it required too much really fine attention to detail. Like where you had to be paying attention, and you couldn't really see what was going on. So this actually sounds like they figured it out. And there's been a ton of people over the course of this time, over a decade, that want to launch something like this. So it sounds like Craig Jones is finally onto something that's like, I've heard it, and we've done a lot of research about how to do this, and he might be onto something there. I was fascinated by the clips I saw, for sure, man.
He went into this being like, this is a story of athlete pay, and I came out of this being like, this is a story about how to do jiu-jitsu differently. And I'll never forget, like, this is a small thing. In fact, you even heard Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier is only repeating these points now. I heard this years ago from Craig Jones. Craig Jones, I remember. So, like, dude, when I first came up in jiu-jitsu, side control.
Yeah.
Side control was a very, very important position. It was not mount or the back, but it was very, very important. And Craig Jones was the first person I ever heard be like, side control is not great. It's not a great position. And his whole argument was, if you actually look at how someone pins from side control, what's the big problem here? Your hands, typically in side control, you want to have one hand. This is a little technical, but the spine is a line. You need to have your hands or your elbows at either end. So you can cross face at the top and you can control the hip on the far end, but that's the two ends of the spine. That's how you lock them in place, in theory.
Right.
But what Craig Jones argues is like, but look at their legs. You can't control them. And this against high-level guys.
That's what DC, sorry, you're talking about. DC was bringing this up.
Dude, Craig Jones has been talking about that for years. This is what I mean. He has and sometimes it's a goofball thing. By the way, I love Hanato Laranja. Could have done without the long interludes of him talking to the crowd.
Laranja goes a long way.
That's right. Well, he was great in the Gabby, and also the Gabby Garcia match for me was nothing. But what I'm trying to point out about Craig is everyone wanted to make this about pay. It is about pay, but pay is part of the story about Craig's broader vision about how to do jiu-jitsu differently.
Right.
And it was a massive, I hate to use the thing because it's been so internet brained by this, but it was a massive red pill moment. It really, really was.
That's cool, man. That's cool. You had some FOMO. I can tell. Like you.
Well, going to Vegas, I always come back with some kind of gonorrhea or communicable disease. So I didn't miss it out.
That still trumps.
But the guy who actually did my tattoos, a bunch of my tattoos, shouts to well, I don't know if he wants me to say his name or not, but in any case, the guy who does my tattoos is a jiu-jitsu brown belt out of I think Black Cat Jiu-Jitsu in the DC area, and he was there. He went to both.
Right on.
And he was like, listen, like they were both good events. Like it's not the case that one was better or worse, but he was like, the energy at CJI, especially on day 2,
that's cool though,
was fucking electric.
See, that's the key. I just feel like Metamoris, the energy was hard to get, and they were even like full bars. You know, they're trying to do a VIP experience, very chandelier affair. The energy level just couldn't pick up. It was strange. So if they figure that part out, I mean, already something's moving there.
I think that they have. I've never been a guy who's like, oh, jiu-jitsu could be on mainstream TV. Dude, if Slap, let me put the camera on me. If slap fighting gets a deal before the Craig Jones Invitational, we riot. We riot. Okay.
I love that. I don't know who this kid was. You posted it on your Twitter.
Just some goofy-haired looking
I
motherfucker.
think his whole
slammed.
face, like, just like.
The only reason I kept it was because his hair doesn't move until his whole face.
And he doesn't
is
really blink, which is like, what the hell?
Yeah, I hope he got.
work?
I'm sure he did get brain damage.
Yeah.
All right, next. From Fisher Aiden. Poetan and Liddell, both in their prime. They're spelled wrong. Who wins?
And Liddell spelled wrong. I'd probably give the nod. Man, that's a crazy one because it's like
Chuck in his prime was a beast.
He was a beast, and people kind of forget how good he was. And it's funny too because this is actually a weird matchup because Glover being kind of the mentor, I guess, of Pereira, coming out of the Liddell, you know, that whole thing.
Right, they're actually connected.
They're
That's
connected.
right.
It's really strange. I would probably give the nod to Pereira, and I just think part of it is like his kickboxing. The kind of kickboxing, I think he, you know, even when Chuck was really at his best, he was still kind of a brawler mentality. Like if you're just putting him together, and I think Pereira would tee off on that.
I think also the leg kicks would be a big deal. This just wasn't something that Chuck had to deal with.
Yeah.
But I will say this. Chuck in his prime, people forget this, dude.
I
mean,
loved it,
when he
man.
blinded Jeremy Horn in their fight, like that was like scary to watch.
Yeah.
And you've never seen Chuck. One of my favorite knockouts. Chuck put away Alistair Overeem.
Yeah.
Holy shit, dude. Went right over the top between his eyes and had Overeem, you know, asking where's woke. Remember that?
Oh my God. You make me like, it's funny because people just don't talk. Like you always see him, he's kind of like an ornament at UFC events now, just kind of one of those guys they dust off and roll out there like, hey, check it out, there's Chuck Liddell. Like, but at the time, man, like I was just imagining or going back to like 2006, 2007 or whatever those dates were, even before then, where it was like he was just the face of
on top
so
of
much.
everything.
It was awesome, man. Like I just remember his events feeling like massive events to me.
This is how Rampage got famous when he smoked him at
100%.
UFC 76, whatever it was.
Yep.
All right, next. From Telvin Kipapa, I think this is the last one. Would you guys want MMA to be in the Olympics? Man,
we get this every 4 years.
Fuck no. Fuck
This is
no.
like an MMA beat thing we used to go across.
Yeah.
Remember we talked
It's like,
about
I mean,
this?
there's so many reasons. People, like, I don't understand what MMA fans want. Like, we want more validation. Guys, I've seen the various stages of MMA. This is about as good as it gets. I mean, it could also be a little bit better, of course, but you're looking at a sport that is not fully developed, but mostly fully developed. Enjoy it for what it is. Also, you know, for all the people being like, all the people in MMA are like, I don't think gay people should vote. Yeah. Let's get the mainstream press to shed some attention on that. I'm sure MMA will come out looking just fine. You know what I mean?
I can't imagine. I mean, first of all, look at like the boxing realm of it, right? Like, so you look back at like Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, when they won it, they were just no names, you know? I think Muhammad Ali was like 18 or 19 years old. He was a Louisville. Nobody knew who he was. And of course, you get like a name going through it. But these guys are
still Cassius Clay.
Yeah, Cassius Clay, exactly. Like you're going back to these guys at the beginning. You didn't see veterans aren't going to do it. The guys who are used to the money and all this, they're not going to fight in the Olympics. And it's so like that's just boxing model. But like when you look at MMA, who are you watching? Like it's not going to be truly representative of the best in the world, you know?
Also, like amateur MMA, I don't want to denigrate it. I actually think it's very important, and I'm glad that it's growing.
Yeah.
But it's not a ready-made product for television, and the rules that you have to use to keep it an amateur system, you know, like if you win a gold medal at the Olympics, there's a good chance you're going to be a very good boxer.
Right.
I'm less convinced you can win an amateur MMA and become anything.
That's what I
great.
mean. I don't know if you're really getting the truth of
Right.
something, or like you're kind of like, oh, here's a future whatever. I don't think you're really getting that.
Did you watch the Olympics this past year?
A little bit, like I'm never the biggest Olympic guy, but I was like, I paid more attention, I think, this year than usual. So yeah,
Dude,
I watched quite a
motherfucking
bit.
Steph Curry.
Oh, I saw all that.
Oh,
I saw
buddy.
that.
I watched the game and then I went downtown. I was actually in Cartagena by this time. And so after he sunk it, we were watching it at my house. I went downtown. I could have been, you could have given me an American flag. I would have walked. Hey, did you see the fucking game, bitches? Huh? Chef Curry with the pop, bitches. That's what I was doing. I was even telling the cab driver in Spanish. I was like, did you see this motherfucking game?
I thought that, if you're talking about transformative moments or like transcendent moments, like truly, because you get those occasionally in the Olympics and just something crazy, it just almost seems superhuman happens. That was one of those moments. Like that Wimby shot where like Wimby's like trying to fly. It's just insane, man.
It was so funny. After the game was over, I saw people being like, you know what, man, I'm a Steph Curry hater. He's like, but I understand what it means to be a Warriors fan now. Because he comes out and he drains, because it wasn't just the 1-3 at the end, it was the 4 threes, essentially back to back to back to back.
He stepped up against Serbia too. Like he was like he both, but this was like that was just a
that was so iconic gold medal game. And I had the same feeling. I'm like, I'm not a Warriors hater, and I really appreciate what he did. But when he's doing it for your team,
I know it
feels way different.
I still hate him. I hate the Warriors.
Did you watch the Olympics, Long Island Luke?
Oh, fuck yeah, dude. I work 1 day a week. I was watching the Olympics every day.
Dude, you had your pants around your ankles for the gymnastics portion.
No, I had the 4 box on Peacock. They would put whatever event, they would curate it as the day went on, so I would just watch whatever was on.
How was the Peacock experience?
No complaints for me.
It was fine?
Yeah.
Do you have Peacock?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
The one big one I don't have. The one
you just refuse on principle?
I mean, what the fuck else am I supposed to get at this point? I've got
There's always
Hulu.
more.
I've got the bundle, so I've got Hulu, ESPN Plus, and what's the other one? Disney. I've got YouTube TV. I've got Netflix. I've got
too much.
It's with my iPhone, but I got the deal with Apple Plus. That expires soon, but I technically still have it. My job is ending with CBS Sports, but I still have for now Paramount Plus.
Okay.
I'm gonna let that shit cancel.
Cancel that.
It was a free perk with the job.
Yeah.
If I lose it now, I'm not paying for that shit.
And your favorite, ESPN Plus, generally speaking.
Dude,
your favorite.
Dude, they reached out to me.
Did they really?
Yeah, they did. I have to tell this story a little bit later, but basically...
That's amazing.
It's like, dude, so what was it 301 was the Erceg Pantoja
Yes.
fight? There was 301, right?
Yep, in Brazil.
So that night, it didn't matter what I did. I purchased it. It wouldn't pot up.
Yeah.
By the way, since then, it has worked flawlessly on Chromecast, Firefox, you name it, any of the browsers, whatever. Somehow, somebody up at ESPN got wind of it. All right, I don't know who it was, but they got wind of it. So they sent like a super duper, like high level customer service guy to me. And first of all, they gave me 2 free pay-per-views.
Wow.
Yeah, so they gave me 302 and 303. 304 was the first one I bought without them.
Gotcha.
But then that was the night where it was like, check 1 2. You guys gonna get my balls on this? My balls are hairy. I was like,
they flashed up the third down miscues.
Yeah, I was like Ben Roethlisberger's third down miscues.
It was so weird and random.
Here's his favorite thing to order at Waffle House.
Oh
Let's get
God.
that on the screen. But the point I'm trying to make is like they definitely fixed it in the sense that like whatever the problem was, it doesn't exist anymore. But the toothpaste is out of the tube on them.
Yeah.
Like, does anybody trust them anymore? Plus, and I think the thing I picked up on, because I made that video essay about it, the thing I picked up on was they've got this venue thing coming out. So it's them, Fox Sports, and Warner Brothers, like this, which is legitimately a very compelling entertainment product if they can get off the ground. There was a preliminary injunction by Fubo to stop it. I don't think they give a fuck about ESPN Plus anymore. I think once this thing gets going, the venue thing, they're just gonna they're gonna wash their hands of it and call it a day.
Crazy, man.
Dude? Who do you know that loves some people might be neutral about it. Some people might like that the library's there. But dude, even the library doesn't work. If you want to go watch fights, UFC. First place I go to is Fight Pass.
That's what I do too.
And if they don't have them, then I go to ESPN Plus, and you have to search the person's number, and then you have to go and so for example, let's say I'm looking up Mario Bautista. So I'll have to plug him in, and then it'll be all the fights. And then they won't, when you click on the fight on ESPN Plus, they won't give you the fight. They give you the fight card that it's on, preliminary or main. And dude, I'm not joking. Several times this has happened to me. Several times where the feed I'll get is the Spanish language one, which I don't mind. Fine, whatever. I mean, it's not what I asked for, but okay, I don't mind.
You like to practice that.
Yeah, exactly. Fine. But if you don't, like, what the fuck? Or I'll get the Gronk family ones. The Gronk family, like, dual cast one.
Weird.
So I'll get the Gronk one. I'm like, dude, this is absolutely not what I am looking for at all. Like, the service is just bad. It's bad.
It's exhausting.
So I appreciate that they were really nice about it. I do. I really appreciate that. And again, 305 for me worked flawlessly. But holy fuck, guys. Your product sucks ass.
That's crazy that they gave you the free paper. I didn't know what happened with that story. I just know that I remember clicking on your complaint and there were a ton of people responding to that. And I was like, whoa, I wonder if they'll get back in touch with you given that. Like sometimes you see somebody complain to the airline, hey, United, you lost my bags or whatever, trying to fish that out.
Yeah.
People have seen it too often. You actually were bringing up a complaint that I think you're voicing for a million people.
So what interesting was one of their bots wrote me and was like, hey, DM us. We really want to help you. And then I DM'd them and they never replied.
Oh, my God.
So that's when I was like, okay, fuck you, mother effers. And that's when I made my video. And someone in the video, somehow the video made their way up there because they gave the customer service agent that they gave me, like, I mean, this was the best customer service agent I've ever, not just because they were nice, but like their troubleshooting ability was beyond next level. So I've been waiting to make a video about it because I had to wait out. I mean, the one that they paid for, I can't. I want to see if the transaction worked. So I've had 2 events in a row where the transactions worked just fine.
All right.
But then it's like Ben Roethlisberger's first down completions against the Washington Commanders.
Oh, man.
All right. Anything we missed here on the show today, Long Island Luke?
No, I think we covered it all.
We didn't do Have You Seen This Shit, but Brian's not here, and it feels sacrilegious to do it without him.
I mean, he still does it when I'm with him, so, I mean.
He worships my nuts. That's why they call him sacrilegious. That's a line from a rapper I like. I'm stealing that completely. Chuck, why don't you plug what you got, buddy?
Well, I'm still with the Ringer MMA show, as I was mentioning off the top.
Yeah, you guys lost Ariel, huh?
We lost Ariel, yes. He's on to bigger and better things, I guess.
Could you work with him in the future?
It could happen.
It could happen, okay.
It could happen. I mean, there's a lot of things kind of in flux, some contract stuff.
Tell me about
we'll say exactly. It's just kind of the industry. We'll see it all pans out. But we'll be doing 2 shows this week. I think we're even doing a post-fight show on the big Cannoneer. Who's he fighting? I'm trying to remember now.
Bohalio.
Who?
Kyle Bohalio.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's Bohalio. That we're going to do that card. So we're going to do a post-fight, and we got our regular Thursday show. So we do the Ringer MMA show, and my byline is still at the Ringer and at themyth.com, MITH.
There you have it.
Yep.
Long Island Luke, why don't you tell the folks how they can get your degenerate bullshit podcast?
It's on YouTube, Main Card Minute. Follow me on social as well. And, we hit plus 2,800 bets. Tune in.
Look at that.
How much do you keep what's your ledger at, your betting ledger?
I'm up 18.54 units. Is
that a lot?
Yeah, man. Anything
in the porn industry, that's
good.
a lot.
In the porn industry, 18.4 is. You're cooking with gas. All right. That is it for us today. Reminder, you can follow us on social. I think you put them up already. Just one more time if you can. Morning Combat everywhere. Chuck Mindenhall, give him a follow on social. Beyond that, we are also, let's see, we have, hold on. Let's tease next week. Long Island Luke. Somebody sent us a song. Did they not?
Oh, man.
Shout out to Lazy Bed in the chat. He sent me an AI MK theme song that apparently he put in the MK Discord. So a bunch of MK fans have already heard it.
Okay, so I heard it today.
I heard a piece of it, yes.
It's fucking great.
Good.
It's fucking great.
It's really fucking good.
Okay, so we're going to play it next week on the show. Next week on the show. Randy Couture at noon next week as well. It's going to be fucking awesome.
Couture?
No, he like the PFL hit us up, was like, hey, would you like to have him on the show? We're like, yeah, sure. And then he didn't show up.
One-on-one
and then they came back and like, let's put him on again. And then he didn't show up again. So now we just do a bit like Randy Couture is going to be here at noon.
All of your PFL stories kind of have a similar vibe.
Dude, I'm trying to give them media. I'm like literally trying. They don't want it. Okay. I mean, we can't make it. You lead a horse to water. All right. With that out of the way, we got to go. That is Chuck Mindenhall. I'm Luke Thomas. Thank you guys so much for watching. BC is back next week.
Boom.
And until then, may all of your gains be loyal.